Senator Joel na lang. We can do Senator Joel. Hindi pa ready si Coco. 17th session of the Senate and the first regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. May we ask our majority floor leader to lead the chamber in prayer.
Tayo po'y manalangin. Dakilang Diyos, Ama naming sumasalangit, kami po ay nagpapakumbaba at naninikluhod na lumalapit sa iyo. Hinihiling po namin ang iyong gabay, kalinga, at katalinuhan mula sa kalangitan upang magampanan namin ang aming tungkulin bilang mga representante ng ng taong bayan. Hinihiling po namin ang iyong pagpapala at pagsama ngayong araw na ito sa panimula ng aming sesyon. Hinihiling namin na patuloy mong pagpalain ang bawat isa sa amin, ang bawat pamilya na aming nirerepresenta sa bulwagang ito. Higit sa lahat, hinihingi namin ang iyong pagpapala at paggabay at pagkalinga sa aming mga kababayan, hindi lang dito sa Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, maging sa apat na sulok ng daigdig. Hayaan mo, Panginoon, na ikaw ang maluwalhati at mapuri sa aming kalagitnaan, habang maingat naming ibinabalik ang lahat ng kapurihan, lahat ng kaluwalhatian, sa tanging pangalan ng aming Panginoong Hesus, ang lahat po'y makiisa at magsabing Amen.
Amen. Secretary, may please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 19 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we defer the approval of the Journal of the 16th Session, Monday, September 5, 2022, at a later hour. So moved, Mr. President.
Is there any objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this juncture, please allow me to acknowledge and welcome our guests from the gallery, guests of our colleagues, Senator Bongo and Senator J.V. Ejercito, the Mayor of Luisiana, Laguna, Mayor Jomafer Alvarez, former Mayor Oli Dator of Lucban, Quezon, with his wife Acel Dator, Philippine Sports Commission Chair Jose Emmanuel Ayala, Acting Executive Director Guillermo Iroy, and the guests of this representation, Mr. President, may kababata and the President of League of Barangay Captains of Caloocan City, Councilor Vergel de Vera.
We also have with us Majority Leader and my dear colleagues, the Secretary of the Environment and Natural Resources, Secretary Yulo Loizaga, who happens to be also the wife of Chito Loizaga, and I am a Ginebra San Miguel
I am a
fan.
Ginebra fan, Mr. President. We
Of course.
welcome them,
Yes,
Mr. President.
together with the USEX, other secretaries of the Environment Natural Resources Department.
Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary, if there's no objection, we proceed with the reference of business.
Bills on first reading. Senate number 1051, establishing an information technology office in every province, city, and municipality and for other purposes. Senator Gatchalian.
Further to the Committee on Science, Technology, Local Government, and Finance.
1052, banning the catching, sale, purchase, possession, transportation, importation, and exportation of all sharks and rays or any part thereof in the country and for other purposes. Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Agriculture, Environment, Natural Resources, and Climate Change.
1053, strengthening and modernizing the warehouse receipts system, repealing Republic Act number 2137 and other related purposes. Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Finance.
1054, providing for the improvement of maternal and childbirth services by establishing birthing centers, training traditional birth attendants, and institutionalizing a layaway program and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Health, Demography, Women and Children, and Finance.
1055, creating the Philippine Rice Development Authority, defining its powers and functions, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Government, Corporations, Public Enterprises, Economic Affairs, and Finance.
1056, enhancing accessibility in the voting of senior citizens, persons with disabilities, pregnant women, and indigenous peoples, amending for the purpose RA 10366, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Electoral Reforms, People Participation, Social Justice, and Finance.
1057, mandating the use of on-body cameras by law enforcement officers during any anti-illegal drug and criminality operations and providing funds therefore, Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, and Finance.
1058, organizing the Nasyonal na Federasyon ng Sangguniang Kabataan and providing for membership of its elected president in the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines, amending for this purpose sections 21 and 22 of RA 10742 by Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Local Government and Youth.
1059, establishing the National Traffic Enforcement and Management Center, defining its powers, functions, and duties, and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Public Services, Ways and Means, and Finance.
1060, institutionalizing the National Economic and Development Authority as an independent economic and planning agency of the Philippine government, defining its functions and amending EO 230, series of 1987 as amended, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Gatchalian.
Refer to Committees on Economic Affairs, Civil Service, and Finance.
1061, providing an additional ground for canceling the certificate of candidacy of a nuisance candidate and making the acts of a nuisance candidate an election offense, amending Section 69, 261 CC, and 264 of BP 881 as amended and for other purposes, Senator Gatchalian.
Further to Committees on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
1062, modifying the grounds for substitution of candidates, amending for this purpose Section 67 of BP 881, series of 1985 by Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
1063, expanding the powers and functions of the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board to provide for the regulation of video games and outdoor media, amending for the purpose PD 1986 by Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Public Information, Games, and Amusements.
1064, strengthening the forfeiture powers of the state, amending for the purpose certain provisions of RA 1379 by Senator Poe.
Further Committees on Justice and Human Rights.
1065, establishing information and communications technology hubs nationwide, Senator Poe.
Further Committees on Science and Technology, Local Government, Ways and Means, and Finance.
1066, granting senior citizens a minimum of 5% discount on the first 150 kilowatt hours of electricity consumption and on the first 50 cubic meters of water consumption, an exemption from the value-added tax, amending for this purpose RA 9994 by Senator Poe.
Further Committees on Social Justice, Ways and Means.
1067, strengthening the Internal Affairs Service of the Philippine National Police, amending for this purpose certain provisions of RA 6975 and for other purposes, Senator Poe.
Further Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
1068, amending RA 1405, otherwise known as the Secrecy of Bank Deposits Law, Senator Poe.
Further Committees on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
1069, creating a vaccine and health passport program, amending for this purpose RA 11525 and providing funds therefore, Senator Poe.
Further Committees on Health, Demography, and Finance.
1070, eradicating abusive contractualization practices and penalizing employers and contractors who commit such abuses by amending for this purpose Book 3, Title 2, and Book 6, Title 1 of PD 442 as amended by Senator Poe.
Further Committees on Labor and Employment, Human Resource Development.
1071, providing a unified system of extending and processing scholarship grants, student loan programs, subsidies, bursaries, and other financial support windows for the Filipino youth, thereby establishing the National Scholarship Commission, providing funds and for other purposes, Senator Poe.
Further Committees on Basic Education, Higher Technical Vocational Education, Finance.
1072, strengthening the institutional capacity of the Office of the Ombudsman by amending certain provisions of RA 6770 and providing funds therefore, Senator Poe.
Further Committees on Justice, Human Rights, Ways and Means.
1073, creating the Philippine Airports Authority, defining its powers, functions, and responsibilities, providing funds and for other purposes, Senator Poe.
For the Committee on Government, Corporations, Public Services, Ways and Means and Finance.
1074, broadening the opportunities of Filipino youth by allowing graduates of K-12 enhanced education in the Philippine National Police, amending for the purpose PNP Law RA 6975 as amended by RA 8551 by Senator Poe.
For the Committee on Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, Basic Education.
1075, expanding the benefits of the Social Security System to provide for unemployment benefits, amending for this purpose RA 8282 by Senator Poe.
For the Committee on Labor, refer to the Committee on Government, Corporations, Labor and Employment Development.
1076, establishing a rental subsidy program for informal settler families, appropriating funds and for other purposes, Senator Lapid.
For the Committee on Urban Planning and Housing and Finance.
1077, an act to define and protect the rights of taxpayers, Senator Lapid.
For the Committee on Ways and Means.
1078, granting additional leaves for victims of domestic violence, providing parameters therefore and amending for such purpose RA 9262 by Senator Lapid.
For the Committee on Civil Service, Labor and Employment.
1079, establishing the National Center for Geriatric Health and Research Institute, defining its powers and functions, creating regional geriatric specialty centers in the Department of Health-related retained hospitals, and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Estrada.
For the Committee on Health, Demography, Ways and Means and Finance.
1080, providing for the preservation, reforestation, afforestation, and sustainable development of all Philippine mangrove resources, defining for that purpose the acts prohibited within mangrove forests and for other purposes, Senator Estrada.
For the Committee on Environment, Natural Resources and Finance.
1081, requiring the establishment of fully equipped science laboratories in every public elementary and secondary school and for other purposes, Senator Estrada.
For the Committee on Science and Technology, Basic Education, Ways and Means and Finance.
1082, institutionalizing the participation of civil society organizations in the preparation and authorization process of the annual national budget, providing effective mechanisms and for other purposes, Senator Estrada.
For the Committee on Electoral Reforms and Finance.
1083, reforming the National Apprenticeship Program and providing standards for the training and employment of apprentices and regulatory standards for accreditation of apprenticeship programs, Senator Estrada.
For the Committee on Labor and Employment, Ways and Means.
1084, providing for a Magna Carta of Agricultural Development Workers, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Civil Service, Agriculture and Finance.
1085, modernizing the Bureau of Immigration by defining its powers and functions, expanding, rationalizing, and further professionalizing its organization, upgrading the compensation and benefits of its officials and employees, appropriating funds, and for other purposes, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Justice, Human Rights, Civil Service and Finance.
1086, providing for a Magna Carta for child development workers, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Social Justice, Civil Service and Finance.
1087, declaring the 27th day of July of every year a special working holiday in observance of the founding anniversary of the Iglesia ni Cristo and for other purposes, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes.
1088, preserving the indigenous games of the Philippines, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Culture and Arts and Sports.
1089, defining the maritime zones under the jurisdiction of the Republic of the Philippines, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Foreign Relations.
1090, an act to amend certain sections of RA 7431 and for other purposes, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Civil Service and Government Reorganization.
1091, establishing a rental subsidy program for informal settler families, appropriating funds and for other purposes, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Urban Planning, Housing and Finance.
1092, authorizing the Department of Health to set and approve the bed capacity and the service capability of all DOH hospitals, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Health, Demography and Finance.
1093, providing for the construction of a multi-purpose gym in all municipalities and cities to serve as evacuation center during times of calamity or disaster, appropriating funds therefore, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Public Works and Finance.
1094, strengthening the conservation and protection of Philippine cultural heritage through cultural mapping and enhanced cultural heritage education program, amending for the purpose RA 10066 by Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Culture and Arts, Local Government.
1095, providing the rights to be accorded to victims of crimes, defining the duties of responsible officers and providing penalties therefore, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
1096, amending certain sections of RA 9173 and for other purposes, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Civil Service, Health and Demography.
1097, establishing greater responsibility and accountability from private employment agencies, amending for the purpose RA 10361 by Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Labor and Employment, Human Resource Development.
1098, providing for the mandatory inclusion of anti-obesity education program and exercise, including play and traditional games in the preschool, elementary, and high school curricula, both in public and private schools and educational institutions and for other purposes, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Basic Education, Health, and Demography.
1099, an act to establish an integrated system for agricultural technology generation and transfer and appropriating funds, therefore, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Agriculture, Food, Science and Technology, and Ways and Means and Finance.
Senate number 1100, establishing the Philippine Air Force Academy and appropriating funds, therefore, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on National Defense, Higher Technical and Vocational Education, and Finance. Additional reference to business.
Additional reference of business. Senate number 1101, implementing the people's right to information and the constitutional policies of full public disclosure and honesty in the public service and for other purposes, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Public Information, Civil Service, and Finance.
1102, establishing the National Health Passport System, thereby strengthening the primary healthcare system and appropriating funds, therefore, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
1103, establishing a National Cancer Center to be known as the National Cancer Center of the Philippines and appropriating funds, therefore, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Health, Demography, Ways and Means and Finance.
1104, instituting the Magna Carta of Filipino Seafarers, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Migrant Workers.
1105, establishing the Television Broadcasting Education Program as an alternative learning system for basic education, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Basic Education, Public Services, and Finance.
1106, protecting consumers and users against forced e-billing, adding for this purpose a new provision and amending certain provisions of RA 7394 and providing penalties for violations thereof, Senator Revilla Jr.
For the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
1107, an act to require the giving of free medical and dental service to indigent children and for other purposes, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Health, Demography, Social Justice, and Finance.
1108, protecting the users of radio frequency identification devices, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Trade and Commerce.
1109, advancing science, technology, and innovation through a harmonized national research and development agenda and mandatory adoption of publicly funded and generated technologies in all government entities, thereby establishing the Science for Change program, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Science and Technology and Finance.
1110, expanding the purposes and application of the Special Education Fund, amending for this purpose Section 272 of RA 7116 for other purposes, Senator Estrada.
For the Committees on Local Government, Basic Education.
1111, renaming the Urdaneta City Bypass Road traversing barangays ng Cayasan, Santo Domingo, Santa Lucia, Camantiles, and Anonas in the city of Urdaneta, province of Pangasinan, as Ambassador Eduardo Danding M. Coanco Jr. Avenue, Senator Lapid.
For the Committee on Rules.
1112, fulfilling the emancipation of agrarian reform beneficiaries from the debt burden through the free award of agricultural lands under the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program to appropriate funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Marcos.
Committees on Agriculture, Food, and Finance.
1113, providing for the modernization of the public health emergency preparedness and response capabilities, establishing for this purpose the Center for Disease Prevention and Control and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Ligarda.
For the Committees on Health, Demography, Ways and Means, and Finance.
1114, preserving the country's traditional folk arts as part of its intangible cultural heritage, amending for the purpose RA 11333 and for other purposes, Senator Ligarda.
For the Committee on Culture and the Arts.
1115, creating the National Museum of Filipino Women and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Ligarda.
For the Committees on Women, Children, Culture and Arts, and Finance.
1116, providing for the establishment of local studies centers in state universities and colleges throughout the Philippines and for other purposes, Senator Ligarda.
For the Committees on Culture and the Arts, Higher Technical Vocational Education, Finance.
1117, establishing the National Coastal Greenbelt Zones and the National Coastal Greenbelt Management Action Plan, providing funds and for other purposes, Senator Ligarda.
For the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources, and Finance.
1118, promoting the development of the bamboo industry by strengthening the Philippine Bamboo Industry Development Council, creating the Bamboo Industry Research and Development Center, providing incentives for bamboo plantation development, appropriating funds therefore, Senator Ligarda.
For the Committees on Trade and Commerce, Ways and Means, and Finance.
1119, establishing public health and environmental standards and safeguards for the better normal in the workplace, public places, and community stores as sustainable recovery from the coronavirus disease, pandemic, and other similar infectious diseases, Senator Ligarda.
Further Minister on Health, Demography, and Finance.
1120, strengthening the national preparedness and response to pandemic, epidemic, and other public health emergencies, creating a medical reserve corps, therefore, and for other purposes, Senator Marcos.
Further Minister on Health, Demography, and Finance.
1121, creating a Philippine Transportation Safety Board, prescribing its powers and functions and appropriating funds, therefore, Senator Poe.
Further Minister on Public Services, Civil Service, and Finance.
1122, abolishing the Philippine International Trading Corporation and for other purposes, Senator Marcos.
Further Minister on Trade and Commerce, Civil Service, and Finance.
1123, abolishing the Department of Budget and Management Procurement Service, DBMPS, and for other purposes, Senator Marcos.
Further Minister on Finance, Civil Service, and Government Reorganization.
1124, providing for an enhanced market access mainstreaming and promotion platform from Philippine micro, small, and medium enterprises through the institutionalization of the Go Local program, appropriating funds and for other purposes, Senator Villar M.
Further Committees on Trade and Commerce and Finance.
1125, creating the E-Commerce Bureau, appropriating funds and for other purposes, Senator Villar M.
Refer to Committees on Trade and Commerce and Finance.
1126, mandating transition of the government to e-governance in the digital age, appropriating funds and for other purposes, Senator Villar M.
Further Committees on Science and Technology, Civil Service, and Finance.
1127, establishing a national accreditation policy to enhance the competitiveness of Philippine products and services, facilitate trade, and protect health, safety, and welfare of consumers and for other purposes, Senator Villar M.
Further Committees on Trade and Commerce and Finance.
1128, promoting the adoption of digital payments for financial transactions of the government and all merchants and for other purposes, Senator Villar M.
Further Committees on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Finance.
1129, providing for government financial institutions unified initiatives to distress enterprises for economic recovery, Senator Villar M.
Further Committees on Banks and Financial Institutions, Government Corporations, Ways and Means, and Finance.
1130, creating the Virology Institute of the Philippines and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Villar M.
Further Committees on Science and Technology, Ways and Means, and Finance.
1131, establishing a medical reserve corps and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Villar M.
Further Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
1132, institutionalizing the program on strengthening and expanding military facility readiness for national security, also known as TICAS, and for other purposes, Senator Villar M.
Further Committees on National Defense, Public Works, and Finance.
1133, establishing the Philippine Air Force Academy and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Estrada.
Further to the Committees on National Defense, Higher Technical and Vocational Education, and Finance.
1134, integrating media information literacy in basic education curriculum, Senator Revilla Jr.
Further Committees on Basic Education, Public Information, Mass Media.
1135, an act to further strengthen the apprehension against the obstruction of justice, amending for this purpose Section 1 of PD 1829 by
Further
Senator
Committees-
Revilla Jr.
Referred to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
1136, mandating the duty to render assistance at sea in accordance with relevant international conventions and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
Referred to the Committee on Foreign Relations and Public Service.
1137, institutionalizing the conditional matching grant to provinces for road and bridge repair, rehabilitation, and improvement, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
Further Committees on Local Government, Public Works, and Finance.
1138, establishing a network of emergency lanes and emergency pathways, appropriating funds and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
Further Committees on Sustainable Development Goals and Futures Thinking, Public Works, and Finance.
1139, modifying the grounds for substitution of candidates, amending for this purpose Section 77 of BP 881, Senator Villanueva.
Further Committees on Electoral Reform and People's Participation.
1140, defining and penalizing marital infidelity, amending for the purpose Act Number 3815, Senator Villanueva.
Further Committees on Justice, Human Rights, Women and Children, Family Relations.
1141, regulating the imposition of fees for the use of parking spaces and facilities in shopping malls, hospitals, schools, and similar establishments, including vacant lots used exclusively for parking, and prescribing penalties for violations thereof, Senator Gatchalian.
Referred to the Committee on Trade and Commerce.
1142, requiring the employment of qualified lifeguards in all public swimming pools and bathing facilities, and providing penalties for violations thereof, Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Trade and Commerce and Local Government.
1143, creating the Special Mass Transit System Support Fund, amending for the purpose Section 7 of RA 8794 as amended, Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Public Services, Public Works, and Finance.
1144, banning the sale, distribution, and use of firecrackers and other pyrotechnic devices, providing penalties for violations thereof, Senator Gatchalian.
Further Committees on Public Order trade and commerce entrepreneurship.
1145, institutionalizing bamboo industry development in the Philippines, creating the Bamboo Industry Development Center, appropriating funds and for other purposes, Senator Gatchalian.
40 million on trade and commerce and finance.
1146, regulating the placement and content of billboards, including their support structure, Senator Gatchalian.
42 million on public works, public information, and mass media.
1147, authorizing local government units to engage in banking activities and other financial transactions with private, universal, and commercial banks, Senator Gatchalian.
30 million on finance and local government.
1148, prohibiting the use of motor vehicles without mufflers or those that are defective or have been modified, which increase the sound emitted by motor vehicles, penalizing owners and drivers that contribute to noise pollution in the environment, Senator Gatchalian.
30 million on public services, health, and finance.
1149, providing for tax incentives for employees on a work from home or telecommuting program, further amending for the purpose RA 8424 and for other purposes, Senator Gatchalian.
30 million on ways and means.
1150, requiring foreign bidders and contract awardees of official development assistance funded projects to employ Filipino workers in their development projects, further amending RA 8182 and for other purposes, Senator Gatchalian.
30 million on economic affairs. There is a second additional reference of business. Please proceed.
Second additional reference of business, resolutions. PS Resolution 168, urging the Senate Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into reports of sexual harassment committed by educators with the end view of creating safe spaces for students that are conducive for learning and making perpetrators accountable for the consequences of their actions, consistent with the provisions of the Safe Spaces Act, Senator Ontiveros.
30 million women and children, family relations.
169, directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry as to the increase in price of construction materials that affects the timely implementation of government infrastructure projects, Senator Villar M.
30 million on trade and commerce and public works.
170, recognizing and congratulating Ernest John E.J. Obiena for his outstanding performance at the 2022 True Athletes Classic event, Senator Villanueva.
30 million rules.
171, commending and congratulating the Baguio General Hospital and Medical Center, Quirino Memorial Medical Center, Makati Medical Center, Governor Celestino Gallares Memorial Hospital, Northern Mindanao Medical Center, Philippine General Hospital, Corazon Locsin Montelibano Memorial Regional Hospital, Green City Medical Center, Jose R. Reyes Memorial Medical Center, and Manila Doctors Hospital for garnering awards and recognition from the World Stroke Organization, Angels Initiatives Awards, and to the Philippine Heart Center for having been conferred the Diamond status for the third time by the Accreditation Canada International, thereby giving an honor and pride to the Philippine hospital and medical healthcare system and profession, Senator Estrada.
40 million rules.
172, directing the appropriate committees to conduct an inquiry on the status of implementation of pertinent laws and policies with the end view of formulating a mandatory and other policy measures and providing sufficient budgetary allocation therefore as needed in order to promote and safeguard economic and related rights and ensure equitable economic opportunities and benefits for women in vulnerable basic sectors, informal sectors, barangay micro-business enterprises, and micro and small enterprises, social enterprises and cooperatives, Senator Legarda.
40 million on women and children, family relations, social justice, and development.
173, commending Dr. Bernadette J. Madrid, a pediatrician and children's rights champion, for being the lone Filipino and woman in the 2022 Ramon Magsaysay Awardees, Senator Revilla Jr.
40 million rules.
174, congratulating and commending pediatrician and children's rights and protection crusader Dr. Bernadette J. Madrid for being one of the 2022 Ramon Magsaysay Awardees, Senator Lapid.
30 million rules.
175, congratulating and commending the entire Philippine delegation on their outstanding performance in the 2022 Cameroon International, held as August 25 to 28, 2022 in Yaoundé, Cameroon, Senator Lapid.
30 million rules.
176, congratulating and commending the Wrestling Association of the Philippines on its outstanding performance in the 2022 Singapore Beach Wrestling Fiesta, held as August 28, 2022 in Sentosa, Singapore, Senator Lapid.
30 million rules.
177, congratulating and commending Ernest John E.J. Obiena for winning the men's pole vault event of the Allianz Memorial Van Damme program of the Wanda Diamond League Athletics at the King Baudin Stadium in Brussels, Belgium on 3 September 2022, Senator Zubiri.
30 million rules.
178, congratulating and commending John Mark Tokong for winning a gold medal and Roger Kasugay for winning a bronze medal in the Phuket Beach Festival 2022, held last August 25 to 28, 2022 in Phuket, Thailand. Senator Lapid.
Committee on the Rules.
179, congratulating and commending Ernest Jan Uy of Vienna for winning 2 gold medals in the St. Wendel City jump in St. Wendel, Germany, and Memorial Van Damme Athletics Meeting Wanda Diamond League in Brussels, Belgium. Senator Lapid.
Committee on the Rules.
180, congratulating and commending the Smart MVP Sports Foundation National Taekwondo for bagging 19 medals in the 2022 Asian Cadet, Junior, and Para Taekwondo Championships held in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Senator Lapid.
For Committee on the Rules.
181, commending and congratulating the 2022 Ramon Magsaysay awardee, Dr. Bernadette J. Madrid. Senator Ortiveros.
For Committee on the Rules. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we resume consideration on Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 3. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there an objection to the motion? There being none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the parliamentary status of this measure is that we are in the period of interpellations. I ask that we recognize the sponsor of the measure, our chairperson of the Committee on Finance, Senator Sani Angara, and to interpellate our minority leader, Senator Coco Pimentel.
The distinguished gentleman from the province of Aurora, Senator Sani Angara, is recognized, our finance chair, and to interpellate a distinguished minority floor leader from Cagayan de Oro, Mindanao, Senator Coco Pimentel is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. We are ready to receive questions from our idol, the Minority Leader, bar top-notcher, graduate of the UP College of Law, the pride of the UP College of Law.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to our sponsor for the disarming words that he said. So I'm no longer in the mood to interpellate, Mr. President.
I will come up with more nice phrases for you, Your Honor.
Okay. But at any rate, I have recovered, Mr. President, and if the good gentleman, our very able, very experienced, very eloquent, and also a proud product of the UP College of Law, will yield the floor to some clarificatory questions on a measure which I find to be still ambiguous as of this moment, Mr. President.
Most willing, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mabuti po at marami pa tayong mga kasamahan na nandito pa sa ating session hall at ang iba yata nandun naman sa dining area natin na naririnig po tayo. Kasi po itong Concurrent Resolution Number 3 na pinag-uusapan natin ay pwedeng sinasabi ninyo kahapon po na medyo expression of sentiment lamang, pero pwede ring maging ano to kasi yung implication po niya hindi klaro sa akin na pwede pala maging mabigat din po na commitment po ito ng mga boboto po sang-ayon dito. Dahil po, for example po sa second resolutory clause na nasa page 2 po, sorry, wala pong line numbers tong ating draft, no? Meron po rito, resolve further to support. So, sa yung second to the last resolutory clause, resolve furthermore to prioritize. So, it appears to be more than just an expression of sentiment, Mr. President, but a document which will bind those who sign it and vote for it. Is this a correct interpretation, Mr. President, of Concurrent Resolution Number 3?
It is an expression of support, Mr. President, as mentioned by the good minority leader. But I don't think it is a legally binding document, meaning I don't think anyone can hold any member of this chamber to account if he decides he wishes not to support any of the measures mentioned here. If there are provisions in those measures which he does not agree with and he feels are perhaps not consistent with the goals of helping our people, Mr. President.
And then, Mr. President, going over the measure we are talking about, concurrent resolution number 3, 2 pages lang po ito, but actually, this is more than 2 pages. We are talking about another document consisting of 21 pages. Am I correct, Mr. President? Para po alam po ng ating mga colleagues po dito sa Senado.
That is correct, Mr. President, and we furnished our colleagues with Annex A. This is the 21-page document being mentioned by the good minority leader. That is the annex to the resolution, the 2-page resolution, and it sets forth in greater detail the measures that the administration wishes to pass and some of the specifics as to how to achieve the goals mentioned in the resolution, Your Honor.
And then the Annex A, Mr. President, can we refer to the Annex A as the medium-term fiscal framework? Is that it? Is that
Yes, yes, Mr. President, that is it.
This, para hindi ako magkamali, I want to be sure na yung ano to? MTFF contains 2 8-point agenda. So, pagka bumoto po ba tayo ng pabor dito sa concurrent resolution number 3, yun po ba ay boto rin pabor? Automatic? Because magkadikit po itong dalawa, Annex A and concurrent resolution number, automatic na boto pabor sa dalawang 8-point agenda. May isang near-term 8-point agenda at mayroong isang medium-term 8-point agenda. Tama po ba yun? Ang pagbasa ko po sa ating resolution.
Well, in broad terms, we support it. It would mean a support for these measures. But again, when these measures actually get to the floor, there is no binding effect on our colleagues, I feel, Mr. President.
And ito pong document na binabasa ko na inaakala ko na o tinatrato ko na the medium-term fiscal framework, hindi po ako sure because this was sent to my staff through Viber message 10 minutes before session yesterday. That's why I begged off from interpolating yesterday. This was not filed together with concurrent resolution number 3. So, but has the MTFF been formally filed with our Bills and Index office, Mr. President? So that when a colleague asks for the Annex A to concurrent resolution number 3, we are sure that we are talking about the same document.
It was not formally filed, Mr. President, but all our colleagues were given a copy yesterday, Mr. President.
How may we know the reason, Mr. President, why? So kung ganun, that means the Senate itself does not have a copy yet of the MTFF that we're talking about?
Apparently, it was given to us after the filing of the measure, Mr. President. So maybe we can remedy that by filing a measure that together with the...
Can we get the answer from the Secretariat?
Majority Leader, it's formally.
Yes.
We were informed that it's formally filed, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues.
We should have informed our sponsor, Mr. President. So, can we get the Annex A? We're talking about Annex A, Mr.
Yes, the
President.
21-page document.
Yeah, the 21-page
Because
document.
I
Yes,
was
Mr.
informed by my
President.
Chief of Staff that it was not formally filed. So that's the answer I gave.
It was formally filed. I was just given the
So I stand
information right
corrected
now.
in that case, Mr.
Your
President.
Honor.
I apologize. I stand corrected. I received wrong information.
Sige, we will just get the siguro the date, time, and probably get my staff will get an official copy of the document as filed because it's best that we talk about the official copy.
Yes, Your Honor.
So that we know that because I may be citing a page in my document.
I completely agree with His
it's
Honor.
not the same.
Yeah, thank you.
So, yes, the Majority Leader has
May I just
information.
clarify the matter, Mr. President? We were just informed that it was just given to us and received yesterday as of 4 p.m. And so I have here with me the copy, Mr. President, Your Honors. Thank you.
Okay, so
I'm sure.
it's on file. Annex A is on file now with the Senate. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Majority Leader.
That's a simple question. It's a yes or no. You find out what the...
Tignan nyo nga kung tama ba. Can we now go to the concurrent resolution, Mr. President? The resolution uses terms or phrases such as short-term, near-term, medium-term, long-term. Yun po ang napansin ko. Pwede po bang maklaro ano yung mga time frame po ng mga gamit ng mga salitang ito? What is how short a period of time is short-term, near-term, medium-term, and how long is the long-term, Mr. President?
That's a good question, Mr. President. I'm just clarifying that. My impression is medium term, short term refers to anything between 1 to 2 years. Medium term is something between 3 to 6 years. And long term is anything past 6 years. That's my impression from, I may be wrong, but we have not defined these terms. So the usage, just gleaning from the document, that is what I gather from the usage of these terms, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. And there's also in the second resolutory clause, first bullet point, near term. So I will just interpret near term as short term. Near term is
yes. I don't think we should create a fourth
yeah, it's there. It's
category,
there,
Your Honor.
but
Mr.
it's
President.
there.
Near term is probably
Have you seen it?
short.
Near future.
Yes, about short. That's equivalent to short term because 1 to 2 years, Mr. President.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. President. Another concept which gave me some problem, Mr. President, is in the fourth whereas clause, which mentions steering our economy back to its high growth path. May I know what qualifies for high growth, Mr. President?
I think that's anything over maybe 5, 6, 7% is considered high growth, I think, Mr. President.
So that's the lowest number there is 5. So anything above 5% would be high growth?
I think, yes, considering the growth comparatively of other countries in the world and in Asia as well.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. President. And even if we look at the concurrent resolution, we encounter high growth. If we look at the MTFF, it also talks about growth and high growth. There are some people, some economists, some philosophers, or some politicians who do not only look at the growth rate, Mr. President, but they look at how the economic benefits are distributed throughout the population. Are we concerned about that, Mr. President?
Yes, certainly, Mr. President, because if you look at the first resolutory condition on page 2, it speaks, the first target set is the GDP growth, which is the macroeconomy. And then you have, secondly, the 9% poverty rate, so a reduction of the poverty rate. So that would allude to the problems of inequality in our society. And then if you look at the fifth, it talks about the GNI, or gross national income per capita, to achieve by 2028 approximately 4,200 gross national income per capita. So that is GDP divided by our population. It alludes to everyone's boat, figuratively speaking, being lifted, Mr. President. Hindi lang po yung buong bansa o yung aggregate, pero yung pati yung bawat isang Pilipino, Mr. President.
Yan po ang problema ko nga sa yan per capita, kasi that's a big figure divided by, may say, 110 million, then we get that. So if the richest of the rich become richer by a tremendous amount, we also raise our per capita GNI or GDP. Mamaya, pasukin din natin yung GNI kasi it's not GDP per capita. So, Mr. President, I just want to make of record that that MTFF, the 21-page document referred to in this concurrent resolution, does not mention a as far as I'm concerned, I did not get this message or impression that we are concerned about how the benefits of economic growth is being distributed, Mr. President. Maybe we can introduce another metric, since anyway measurable ano naman to, measurable quantities. There are formula for this. How come the economic managers did not consider the so-called Gini coefficient, Mr. President, which measures the distribution of wealth within the country, whether or not one or a group of people control it, or go close to zero where its ownership is widely distributed.
It's not used that anymore, di ba? Yung Gini coefficient. Who's NEDA? Sino NEDA dito? Di ba? You don't use that anymore. Di ba? Hindi niya na ginagamit yung Gini, di ba? Okay. Well, it's still being used, Mr. President, the Gini coefficient. It's a measure of the inequality in our society. But I think perhaps they felt that it was already covered here in the reduction of the poverty rate from 18% to 9%, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you for that reply, Mr. President. So, the poverty rate as of this moment, Mr. President, is determined to be 18%. I thought it was more than 20%.
18, di ba? Sino NEDA para the figure? It is, for 2021, it's 18.1%. So representing around approximately 19.9 million Filipinos, Your Honor.
Saan natin nakuha? Saan natin nakuha? Hindi, ano, sir? 2021? Well, okay, but we have our staff research, Mr. President, puts it at 23.7% during the first semester of 2021. So, first semester would be half a year, up to June. So, what was your data, Mr. President, or your information for the full year, end year?
Mr. President, Your Honor, the full year is 18.1%. This is from the Philippine Statistics Authority, Your Honor.
Same source, Mr. President. So we'll just have to revisit that office, find out how we are able to reduce in half a year the poverty incidence rate by 5%, Mr. President, roughly 5%. Well, at any rate, Mr. President, that is a good goal to make it 9% single-digit poverty rate by 2028. A tall order, but if we achieve this, then congratulations to the administration, and to all those who help the administration. Just a matter of styling, Mr. President. If you take a look at the 6th whereas clause, I could sense that this was written with from the point of view of the executive, because it talks about the need to align the economic recovery programs and measures of the national government with the legislative priorities. So only the executive can make such a statement, Mr. President, because the adjustment should come from them, Mr. President.
Just to clarify, Mr. President, is the gentleman referring to the phrase whole of nation approach? Is that the?
I'm at the 6th whereas clause, Mr. President, of the concurrent resolution, page 1.
Yes.
Page 1, the 6th one. There is a need to adopt a whole of nation approach to align all economic recovery programs and measures of the national government with the legislative priorities. So, I believe that only as I understand the sentence, Mr. President, only the executive can make such a commitment. Tayo naman, we realign our legislative priorities if we want to cooperate with some other entity, Mr. President. So I just want to point this out just in case His Honor agrees with my understanding and maybe a styling, ano tawag mo dun, editing can be made, Mr. President.
Yes, Your Honor, certainly. We'll welcome that if it will improve the resolution. And the minority leader is very precise with his computations as well as his language. So we'll welcome that, Your Honor.
Talking about language, Mr. President, this resolution is about fiscal framework. Pinag-isipan ko pong meaning nito. Kaya napatanong ako, and this is where our sponsor can help this representation and can help all of us being the expert in the budget. Isn't the budget the fiscal framework for a given year or for the covered year, Mr. President? The budget law, I mean?
The budget, Your Honor, is the spending document. I tried to elicit the help of our friend, Google. And fiscal is defined as relating to government revenue, especially taxes, and generally contradistinguished from monetary policy, which is the province of a central monetary authority or central bank.
I did not tap Google, but I think I tapped Merriam-Webster online. And fiscally means having to do with finances.
Yes, Your
So
Honor.
it must be income or revenue and also the spending, Mr. President. So,
Well, certainly, the gentleman is correct that in the sense that it is a framework, it just sets out the general framework, and the yearly General Appropriations Act, which we are called upon, or which it is our constitutional duty to pass, will flesh that out. Will flesh out the generality set forth in this framework, Mr. President.
so those, what's the behavior now expected of those who agree with this measure, Mr. President? Balik ako doon, during the budget deliberations, for example, if it's included in the one of the two 8-point agenda mentioned in the MTFF, are those who vote in favor of this concurrent resolution number 3 expected also to support all expenditures connected with the two 8-point agenda in the MTFF, Mr. President?
I don't think so, Mr. President. That would be too much of an expectation on our part, because it's just a general fiscal framework, and if that is the case, then we might as well dispense with debate on these specific measures, Mr. President. But I think we can expect very robust debate on most, if not all, of these measures going forward, Your Honor.
Well, the signatures, those who sign those who vote in favor might disappoint, well, other people in the future, Mr. President, if that is the case. On the first resolutory clause, Mr. President, I have noticed a switch in the concepts. GDP is in the first, third, and fourth bullet points, and then in the fifth bullet point, when we talk about the income per capita, we use GNI. The N, I think, there is national, no? So that must be gross national income. While in the other bullet points, we use gross domestic product. So there is a switch now. I'm used to encountering GDP per capita, but I think GNI is not GDP per capita. So why did the MTFF switch concepts, Mr. President?
I was told by the NEDA resource person here, Your Honor, Mr. President, that the reason for that is GNI is what the World Bank uses when classifying countries as low income or middle income or high income. And because the desired goal in the resolutory clause mentioned by the good minority leader speaks of the attainment of upper middle income status, they chose to use the metric of GNI or gross national income, Your Honor.
So for a so that we will use the metrics or the language of the World Bank. So pag sinabing ganon, pasok tayo. GNI, no? World Bank uses GNI.
Opo.
Okay, sige, thank you.
Opo, Your Honor.
Sige, if for that reason. Mr. President, can we only if the good sponsor agrees, no, can we state for the record now the starting figures of each bullet point at the start of the Marcos administration? So for example, yung 9% single-digit poverty rate by 2028. So poverty rate at the start of the Marcos administration was already stated by the sponsor to be
18.1, Your Honor.
18.1,
As of the
yes,
end
sir.
year 2021.
Yes, sir. Can we get the other, sir?
With respect to the national government deficit to GDP ratio, that's the third line, Your Honor.
Yes.
The goal is to achieve a 3% deficit to GDP ratio. And currently we are at 6.3, I think. No? Tama ba?
6.3.
6.3 as of end year.
Okay.
I saw we reached 7% at one point, no, in the previous year, but
At the start of
I'm-
the Marcos administration, so
yeah.
anyway,
so at the halfway point of
halfway,
2022.
so
Yeah.
6.3. Okay na siguro yun.
The GDP, 6 na tayo. Diba?
Ano yung growth rate
Deficit to
natin
GDP.
sa Marcos, at the start of the Marcos administration?
Di ba nag-6 na tayo? Ano siya? At the start of the administration.
Kailan?
What was the bale,
Hindi,
as
yung
of,
start of the Marcos
June 30,
administration.
2022?
Tama, no?
What was
June
our
30, 7.4.
national government
7.4.
to GDP?
Pass, mataas.
National government deficit to GDP ratio. Yeah. As of June, 6.5%, Your Honor, for the deficit to GDP ratio.
Deficit to 6.
And as for the national government debt to GDP ratio, the goal here is to lessen that by 2025. We are currently at 62.1% national government debt to GDP ratio, Your Honor. As for GNI per capita, as of the start of the administration, we were at forgive us, Your Honor, we're just waiting for the figures.
Yung una sa
Because they measure it year on year, Mr. President. So at the end of 2021, it's
Yeah. Sige po.
$3,643 GNI per capita, Your Honor, with the goal of increasing to 4,256 GNI by 2028, Your Honor.
For the first bullet point,
For
Mr.
the
President.
GDP growth, we grew by
Ano yung sa iyo?
2021. Anong GDP growth natin? So, year on year, 2021, yung yearly growth niya for the whole year, for 2021. 5.7, Mr.
5.7.
President, about the quarter, first quarter and second quarter. Yes. For the first quarter of this year, we grew by 8.2%, Mr. President, and for quarter two, we grew by 7.4%, Mr. President. And we hope to, according to this document, achieve 6.5 to 7.5% GDP growth, and for 2022, and then increase that to 6.5. That range will increase to 6.5 to 8% GDP growth annually between 2023 to 2028, when the Marcos administration will step down, Mr. President.
What was the 5.7 Mr. President mentioned
That was the
earlier?
2021
2020.
annual GDP growth, Mr. President.
Okay, so given that the first quarter 2022 GDP growth rate was 8.2% and the second quarter was 7.4%. So these are quite high and impressive growth rates. So our target, the target of the MTFF of 6.5 to 7.5 and 6.5 to 8% appear to be modest targets, Mr. President. Already achieved, Mr. President.
Achievable, but of course, the future is not always certain, Mr. President. So I think we have to grow by at least 5.2% for the rest of the year, if I'm not mistaken, to
Yeah.
5.3 to achieve that
The 6.5.
the lower end of
yeah.
the 6.5, Your Honor, for the second half of the year.
I'm looking at the higher end, Mr. President, given the two quarters.
But we
growth
just have to
rate. Is that-
replicate,
is that-
just to sort of replicate the first half performance to achieve the higher end, Mr. President.
Yes, with the Burr months, the Christmas season, I think that would be more economic activities leading to GDP growth rate. So, Mr. President, at least we made off record the start. Ito na yon. This is the start of the Marcos administration, and then this administration wants to be judged by measurable, ano bang tawag mo dito? Measurable criteria. And then we're more scientific now in our approach with governance, and I appreciate such an approach, Mr. President. But subject to my suggestion addressed to our economic managers or to those who are crafting the medium-term fiscal framework and its updates and revisions, to also take a look at, sana hindi lang yung mere mathematical gross national product or gross national income divided by population equals per capita. It does not reflect it does not reflect the distribution of the economic benefits. So thank you, Mr. President, for that. On the second resolutory clause, I encounter the phrase on the first bullet point, Mr. President, risk-managed interventions. May I know what is the meaning of risk-managed, Mr. President?
I'm looking for the phrase, Your Honor, so I can see
Yes,
the context.
second resolutory clause,
Second
first
resolutory
bullet point,
clause.
end of the first line, Mr. President.
Implement risk-managed interventions. Well, I suppose from the fiscal standpoint, risk is excessive debt, indebtedness, Mr. President, and excessive spending. I would assume, Mr. President. So any intervention in these areas of food security, transport and logistics, energy, health, education would have to take into account the effect on the fiscal figures as we discussed earlier, Mr. President, Your Honor.
So thank you for that clarification, Mr. President. On the second bullet point of the same clause, Mr. President, we encounter now the concept of high quality and green jobs for Filipinos. May we get more information, Mr. President, about what is a high quality job and what is a green job? Are these Are these two distinct concepts, or this go together? That is a high quality and green job, Mr. President.
I think they're distinct. It's a good question, Mr. President. Right? But dear colleague, I think they're distinct concepts because high quality refers to the type of job and maybe the type of salary, meaning it addresses underemployment, perhaps, that there is the person who acquires that job or who occupies that job is no longer looking for additional work because it's a quality job in that it allows him to cover the needs of his family, Your Honor, because we have a high underemployment rate, which indicates although we are producing jobs, perhaps the jobs we are producing are not of high quality because that person, according to the government data, is still looking for work. Naghahanap pa siya ng trabaho kasi hindi pa sapat para sa kanyang pamilya yung hawak niyang trabaho. So that's what our figures tell us. That's my interpretation, Your Honor. Dito naman po sa green jobs, I think that adverts more to the future of the planet. So sustainability, impact, carbon footprint, perhaps. We passed the Green Jobs Law, incidentally. I remember I sponsored that around 2015 or 2016, Mr. President. So maybe if my staff can look at that
Yeah, it's mentioned
piece
in
of
the,
legislation, if there is a definition of green jobs then. But I think in the larger context or the connotation of green jobs is really in industries that promote sustainability, the circular economy, reduce wastage, reduce carbon footprints. That's my understanding, Your Honor, of
Yes,
green jobs.
the law, Your Honor, that you help sponsor and craft is mentioned actually in the MTFF.
Unfortunately, I don't know if the DOF has issued the guidelines or implementing rules for it, Your Honor, because under that law, you know, the DOF is always keeps a tight watch on laws which mention incentives, and there have been a number of measures emanating from this chamber, Your Honor. I'm sure you're very well aware, and some of our colleagues were quite irate when their measures get vetoed. But usually, the reason is because the government felt, or the executive branch felt, that the incentives given were too generous. That's why in the Green Jobs Law, what we did was delegate it to the DOF to state which incentives will be allowable. So I'd like to also inquire, maybe if the DOF wants us to pass this measure, maybe we can ask them to pass also the implementing rules of the Green Jobs Law, Mr. President. Thank you for raising that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you for for bringing that to our awareness, no? Na meron din talaga tayong green jobs law. So moving on to the next resolutory clause, Mr. President, what we now encounter is the phrase encouraging localized investment. May this representation be assisted in understanding what is a localized investment, Mr. President?
Ano ba yung localized investment? I think this is explained further in page 18 of the MTFF, the Annex A, Your Honor, Mr. President. Under the heading or rubric of localized investment and growth programs, it says that with increased focus on assisting the weakest sectors of the economy, local government participation and even competition will be encouraged when formulating and implementing regional investment and growth programs. Increased spending by local government units and even private business sectors should ease the demand for and spending on national government provided goods and services such as healthcare, science and technology, education, among others, in the countryside. So my read of that, Your Honor, Mr. President, is that they're trying to encourage a more dispersed type of investment rather than what is happening now, and there is a concentration of investments in certain regions. They would like more participation, and in line with what you inquired about earlier regarding the whole of nation approach, it is also asking the local governments to participate as well as the calling for the greater participation of the private sector, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that response. In the fourth resolutory clause, Mr. President, we encounter the phrase growth-inducing expenditure. Last po yan, sa last line po ng resolved furthermore. May we know what is a growth-inducing expenditure, Mr. President?
My read of that, Mr. President, is expenditure which produces a multiplier effect in our economy. So things like infrastructure, investing in human capital, Your Honor, perhaps our digital infrastructure, because these are touted to have multiplier effects in the economy, meaning the effect goes beyond the initial investment in terms of producing additional investment, producing jobs, and so forth. A so to speak, virtuous cycle, Mr. President.
Yes, I have encountered that word repeatedly, multiplier effect in the MTFF. So would spending billions in intelligence funds and billions in confidential funds be a growth-inducing expenditure, Mr. President?
Perhaps because intelligence funds, I think we don't really know by their nature they're confidential, so it's difficult to say. But in the abstract, Your Honor, if they are spent and they lead us to make better decisions, perhaps, and lead us to have a better security situation, that is a value added, and perhaps that could produce multiplier effects in the long run. But that's a bit of a stretch,
Yes,
Your Honor,
yes.
Mr. President.
That's really a best good faith, ideal, utopian na scenario, Mr. President. So per se siguro, on a per se, by its nature, I don't think that's a good example of a growth-inducing expenditure.
But it depends on the result also of the expenditure. We don't know where these monies are really spent.
Correct.
Because they have what they call a closed envelope audit or something like that,
Yes,
where they just write what they spend it on and they give it to the Commission on Audit. So yun lang. At
Yeah.
ako, I've never worked for the Commission on Audit, so I've never headed a agency that was required to audit. So I don't know exactly what. This is just anecdotal,
Yes, sir.
Mr. President, Your Honor.
For example, sir, kunyari, ibinuhos yung parehong kantidad parehong halaga ng pera, kunyari ibinuhos sa edukasyon, yun, ano tayo doon? I mean, per se, by the nature of the expenditure, we can say that's a growth-inducing expenditure. Tama po ba yun, Mr. President? That there are some types of expenditure
Certainly.
that non-debatable na it's a growth-inducing expenditure.
Certainly, Your Honor. You're
Thank
correct
you.
in that respect.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that, Mr. President. And then I just noticed in the fifth resolutory clause, sa dulo na po, resolved finally, the resolution states that the MTFF shall be subject to review and updating in 3 years, so etc. So ang pumunta lang sa isip ko po, the MTFF is the product of the executive branch. Tama ba na nasa concurrent resolution natin ay parang inuutusan natin ang executive branch to review the document that you have presented to us, and then we are agreeing to it, Mr. President?
Well, this is a self-imposed it's a self-imposed mandate, Your Honor, Mr. President. No? Sila mismo ang naglagay nito dito.
Precisely.
We did not ask it from them. So I think in that sense, you mentioned earlier that it was commendable that they presented their targets in quantifiable, measurable terms. Well, again, this perhaps is a reflection of that, and is an extension of that, Your Honor. They wish to be held accountable. They wish to make things transparent, the budgeting and the assumptions behind some of the legislation that we are pushing and passing, Your Honor.
Kaya tama po yun, Mr. President. So yung ating last resolutory clause, gives us a hint that this executive had a hand in drafting this concurrent resolution as well as the last whereas clause. Yun yung nakuha kong impression
Opo.
na
Galing po sa kanila talaga to.
Oo nga. So
Opo.
ngayon po, ganito po eh. Ngayon ang ending nito, ang participants po rito sa concurrent resolution number 3 actually is the House, the Senate, plus the Executive. Parang andun na lahat ng hallmarks ng batas. So, but are we saying that this is really non-binding at all to those who will vote in favor? What is this, more or less? What will this amount to, Mr. President, if this concurrent resolution is approved? Na merong participation ng executive, may participation ng House, may participation ng Senado. Di ba yun yung yun yung mga steps sa paggawa ng batas eh. So, and yet we say that this is merely symbolic, Mr. President?
Well, I don't think it's merely symbolic, Your Honor, because it is a framework. So it will really, lahat ng gagawin natin ay pwedeng ipasok dun sa framework na yon. So, but as to the specific parts of the framework, it does not bind us as to what we want to pass. Meaning we don't have to take up this particular bill just because it's there in the medium-term fiscal framework or MTFF. Sa akin, parang we're just committed to the generalities provided here. Meaning gusto natin bumaba po ang kahirapan, tumaas po ang kita ng ating mga kababayan. Gusto natin na bumaba ang utang ng ating bansa. That's all it says to me, Mr. President. It doesn't really say that it says in an ideal world, it would be nice to pass taxes on the following sectors. Pero pagdating po dun sa actual na batas, hindi naman tayo nakatali kung anong ilalagay natin dun sa batas na yon, Your Honor.
Because doon po sa second to the last resolutory clause, binabanggit na dito yung ambition natin 2040, which I think is also a plan. Ilang pages ba yung ambition natin? And then we also have, it also mentions the 2022 to 2028 medium-term fiscal framework. That's the 21-page document that was submitted yesterday.
You have the ambition natin.
And the commitment by those who will support this measure is to prioritize legislative measures that are consistent with the long-term socio-economic vision as embodied in. So, ambition natin 2040 and then the MTFF. So, does that not bind those who will vote in favor of this resolution to the two other documents mentioned in this concurrent resolution, Mr. President?
Yes, there is a buy-in, definitely. But in terms of, maybe it's more of a moral suasion type of thing rather than a legal. Because no one can take us to court or no one can say, you promised. But I said, I promised to support the aims, but I did not promise to vote for certain bills. Because then you will explain why in certain bills you are opposed or you are in favor of it. I don't think we are tied in that respect, Mr. President.
Is there a deadline? Are we following a timetable or are we targeting a certain date when we need to pass this concurrent resolution number 3, Mr. President?
Wala naman hong strict
Wala
deadline, pero I think what they are aiming for, the economic managers, Mr. President, is before we tackle the budget sana, maipasa natin ito. Kasi yung budget is the specific document that will lay out the specifics of what is laid out dito sa MTFF, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Kaya ko po natanong nyo kasi hingi sana ako ng oras pa.
Opo.
Kung pwede ko masuspend yun.
Opo, opo.
Para
Opo.
aralin ko po yung 21-page document na MTFF. But only if the sponsor will say that that is intimately connected with our concurrent resolution number 3 na hindi lang dapat 2 pages po binabasa natin, pati po yung Annex A na 21 pages na MTFF. Tama po ba yan, Mr.
I think
President?
they are definitely connected, Your Honor. No? But again, repeating what we said earlier, you're not tied to those the measures mentioned there. They're just the legislative agenda, I think, of the economic managers that they would like us to pass, as successive administrations have done in the past They come to us with a wish list of bills that they would like passed, as set forth in the SONAs of various presidents in the past. Pero as you know, some we've passed and others we have not, because we don't agree with the priorities. And perhaps that's the same in this case, I would think, because I don't think anyone can tie the hands of Congress in exercising its duty as a legislature. Our power is said to be plenary or wide-ranging, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, but a vote in favor of this measure is a buy-in not only to the paragraphs of the concurrent resolution number 3, but also to its Annex A, the MTFF. So,
Yes, Your Honor.
is it yes? Given the answer of the sponsor, it may be also a legitimate thing to do to interpolate on the MTFF, Mr. President.
Yes, Your Honor, you may do so, but again, yes, you may.
Okay, so yun, given that answer, Mr. President, and considering the fact that we first saw this MTF 21-page document called the MTFF yesterday at around 10 to 3, so may we ask for if that I will be suspending my interpellation to resume at a later time, and this time I've gone through the concurrent resolution number 3. We now go to the so-called Annex A, which is the MTFF, Mr. President. If the sponsor is
Of course,
all right with that,
Mr. President. Who am I to refuse
Thank
the good minority
you.
leader, Mr. President?
Well, anyway, it's for the benefit of everyone, and for the Filipino people who may be interested in our discussion, Mr. President. Salamat po, Mr. President. If I will suspend my interpellation.
Thank you. Thank you to the good minority leader for his
Thank you,
questions.
sponsor.
Session suspended.
recognize the distinguished gentleman from Taguig Pateros. We'd like to recognize the distinguished lady from City of Taguig and Pateros, no other than Senator Pia Cayetano, for her manifestation. I move that she be recognized, Madam President.
Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I actually didn't make a reservation to interpolate because I assume that it is just a setting of general policies. But I upon reading the resolution, it makes reference to the medium-term fiscal framework, which is a 21-page document. So I will have to read this so that I can propound questions if necessary. So I'm reserving my right to interpolate. I'm reading it now. I don't know when I'll finish it because I want to take time to understand it, what it is that we are committing to. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cayetano. Madam President, at this juncture, I move that we recognize the distinguished gentleman from City of Taguig and Pateros, no other than Senator Alan Peter Cayetano, for his interpellation.
Senator Alan Peter Cayetano is recognized.
Madam Senate President, may I have the privilege of asking some questions to the good sponsor, my kababata, the senator from Aurora Province?
Most definitely, Mr. President, to the former Speaker and the former Majority Floor Speaker of the House and the former Majority Floor Leader, who's one of the most learned members of this chamber.
Thank you very much, Madam Senate President. I think one of the things I taught him when we were both younger is that flattery will get you everywhere. So thank you for your kind words. I will only ask half of my questions. Do you agree, dear Chairperson of the Committee on Finance, that when we talk about framework, about planning, about funding, it should always reflect our values?
Certainly, Mr. President.
Yes. And even from the preamble of the Philippine Constitution, which is basically an articulation of the sovereign will of the Filipino people, we ask for the aid of the Almighty. So it will be correct to describe Filipinos, regardless of our personal spiritual beliefs, that tayo ay makadiyos.
Yes, I agree with His Honor, Your Honor.
And any religion, and in our case, majority Christian, ang turo is that if you love God, love Him above everything and everyone, and if you love God, you should love others. Yes. Sorry
Hard to dispute
Yes,
that,
yes.
Your Honor.
No, I'm just laying the basis for the questions because the U.S. Military uses do we call it a slogan or a mantra, di ba, na no one left behind. And I think President Bush adopted this for his education program, and then Senator and former Secretary of State, maganda din yung kanyang mantra naman, yung stronger together. No? I think when we were young, Senator Sani, we said it a different way, walang iwanan.
Yun po. Sasabihin ko, meron ding walang iwanan si
Diba?
former President Erap, the father
Yes.
of our two colleagues. Mr.
So
President.
during summer breaks, the father of Senator Sani, Senator Ed, used to bring us to their place in Nasugbu. And when we'd go home, we'd always say na walang iwanan, meaning huwag kang pumunta doon na hindi kami kasama. So I'd like to focus on that when it comes to this framework, no? Na dapat walang iwanan, dapat no one's left behind. And if you would allow me, I learned something from former NEDA Secretary Habito. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to argue with people like you, like the Secretary of Finance, Secretary Jokno, and all of our economists. For those of us who took law but evaded math and statistics in our pre-law. So Secretary Habito came up with a simpler formula, which is PTK or PTIC, which is look at the presyo, trabaho, at kita. So kung mababa presyo at affordable, happy ang tao. Pag mataas ang presyo at hindi affordable, malungkot ang tao. Pag maraming trabaho at quality yung trabaho, masaya tao. Pagka mahirap, walang trabaho, nag-abroad, na kakahiwalay sa pamilya, social problems, and then kita, pag maganda yung kita, again, masaya ang tao. And I believe our Senate President Pro Tem had several speeches or one or two speeches before about yung, ma'am, if I'm correct, yung happiness, using the happiness index, no, instead of the usual GDP, GNP, job indicators and everything, no. So, given that, maybe for the purposes of organization, can I go through the 21 pages, starting on page 4 with ensure food security? I know by no means is this a perfect document, no? Wala, framework naman po to, no? But of course, words matter. God created the world through words. If you look at the Bible, sabi, in the beginning, there was the Word, no? So, in that sense, I see food security, but there's really nothing that reflects the ambition na ang food ay maging affordable. So, pag sinabing food security, lalo during the time of the pandemic, maraming bansa, instead na i-export ang pagkain nila or yung kanilang PPEs nung umpisa, di ba? Ginamit nila. Yung mga bansa katulad ng Estados Unidos o ng United States of America, may strategic stockpile sila, whether it's medicine, PPEs, and food, no? And they realized during this time of globalization na pag nag-pandemic pala, syempre, unahin mo, charity begins at home, unahin mo sarili mo. So, medyo kompleto naman siya pagdating sa securing food, prioritizing productivity. We have a president who chose to be also the Secretary of Agriculture to focus nga on this, no? But I would be more comfortable, at least on the record dito sa Senado, kasi I don't think we're in a position to amend this, no? So it's more of, we'll go through it, and it's more of our resolution, and maybe our resolution can reflect, if not the records can reflect, that what's important din sa food security is the accessibility or affordability. Kasi kung kompleto ka nga ng pagkain, pero yung mahirap, isang beses na lang kumakain sa isang araw, so theoretically, you have food security in a national security way, but people are hungry, baliwala rin, di ba?
Yes, I agree with the gentleman, definitely. I think that's the bulwark. Food security and affordability is a bulwark of all what we would call progressive nations, and hopefully that will be one of the guiding principles, given that he mentioned the President is also the acting as Secretary of Agriculture. So sana yung abot kaya po yung presyo.
In fact, the President during the campaign went so far as saying that 20 pesos per kilo, ibaba natin ng 20 pesos. Later clarified that it was an aspiration, and it's good to aspire, no, for cheaper food, especially kung staple yan, katulad ng bigas o ng kanin, no? And I remember when we were much younger, Senator Sani, parati tayong kino-compare sa Thailand at paulit-ulit natin naririnig na yung mga scholars nila dito nag-aral sa atin, sa IRI, sa UPLB, and then they're much more advanced ngayon. And I remember that parating sinasabi, nung pareho tayong 60 million people, halos pareho ang baht at saka peso, ang lamang ng Thailand ay may dalawang affordable o mura, in a sense, relatively mura sa kanila. Gamot at saka pagkain. So I just wanted to emphasize that pagdating sa pagkain, because in the last, maybe last year of President Arroyo, but definitely first year of President Aquino until before the pandemic, lumiliit yung yung kumukonte ang mahirap. But do you remember when we were in Congress, di ba? Yung
Yes.
nafi-feature sa TV nga nun, yung isang noodles, buong pamilya na.
Yes, Your Honor.
Diba?
I remember that, and I remember always being compared to Thailand. Pero ngayon, parang Indonesia at Vietnam na yung comparison natin. At pretty soon, na kung hindi tayo masigasig sa mga sinasabi mo, baka ibang bansa na sa ASEAN ang ikumpara sa atin dahil nalipasan na tayo o nalampasan na po tayo ng bansang yon.
In mentioning that, I remember when President Erap became president at nauna ako sa iyo ng 3 years and I had the privilege
6
of
years.
2001 ka, di ba? 2004. So nauna ako ng 2 terms and I had the privilege of being with your aunt, no, who was one of our mentors with Boyet Gonzales and Mar Rojas sa Rules Committee noon. And President Erap would always say na dati number 2 tayo sa Asia. Number 2 lang sa Japan. Ngayon, number 2 tayo from the bottom. And I actually asked some of my friends na nagpatuloy bilang professor sa UP na hanapin anong basis nun. No? And yung basis pala nun ay may World Bank study in the either late 60s or early 70s saying the 2 countries na malamang walang mangyari sa kanila or mahihirapan talaga is Korea and Taiwan. Both in terms of Korea, it was the harsh weather and the Korean War. And in terms of Taiwan, there were many other factors, no? And we're seeing some of those political factors now. But yung dalawang bansa na yon zoomed up during the time that we were in elementary and high school and growing up. And yung Pilipinas, baliktad. We were, yung potential natin was being touted during that time, no? So actually, kung hindi naman nangyari ang pandemic, to be fair to President Duterte and President Aquino, maganda trajectory natin, no? So on that point, I'd like to go to, so just to emphasize na aninanda mo kung patay na kabayo, so ganun din, aninanda mo kung hindi ma-afford nung kabayo, di ba? So kailangan yung damo, kayang bilhin nung kabayo o yung nag-aalaga nung kabayo, no? Going to reducing transport and logistical cost, am I correct to assume that when they talk about cost, they're talking about money?
Yes, Your Honor. What is paid by those who ship goods to lower, eventually to lower prices, but not just for the sake of reducing these costs, but also with the end goal of reducing prices, because that's a factor of the prices.
And am I correct that in every medium and long-term development plan that at least you and I have seen, improving transportation of services, of goods, of people, reducing the cost is always there?
It is always there, and it's more pronounced in our country because of our archipelagic nature, Mr. President.
Yes. And I know for a fact, because we were together in many of these debates, that traffic has become such a big problem. Yeah. So I just like the records to reflect that when we talk about cost, we should also talk about opportunity cost, time with the family. Kasi pwedeng bumaba ng husto. So kung sasabihin mong ang pamasahe mo kung galing kang Bulacan papuntang, let's say, Maynila, my wife Lani used to travel from Marilao to the Senate to go to work here, no? And let's say if the cost was 100 pesos and we're successful with the railways and it became 80 pesos, but if the time went from 1 hour to 2 hours, then nawalan ka rin ng isang oras na dapat kasama mo yung pamilya mo. So my point is, Madam Senate President and to our good sponsor, our planners should also look at time and the opportunity to be with family or to do extracurricular activities. The young people would use now yung life-work balance, di ba? So kung if it takes you 2 to 3 hours to go to work one way, 2 to 3 hours to go to work pabalik, kahit na mataas ang sweldo mo, quality ang job mo, bumaba yung pamasahe, pero 4 to 6 hours ka naman nasa kalye, Kahit sabihin mong may internet, may Facebook, whatever, what's 4 hours from the time you start working until you retire, di ba? Napakalaking oras nun.
I completely agree with the gentleman from Taguig, former speaker, Mr. President, because he's saying it's not just money, it's also the quality of one's life, and definitely cannot argue with that. And I think I've seen it in some of my staffers who came with me from the House. They could no longer take the 2-hour journey from Pasay to Quezon City. So they chose to take a job, a lower paying job at the House of Representatives rather than a higher paying job here, because then they have a travel time of maybe 20 minutes as opposed to 2 hours and more.
Yes.
So that exemplifies what you were saying, Mr. President.
And to put it in very concrete, practical manner, we're building the subway, and before the pandemic, I heard once it is done, government will have to subsidize maybe towards 100 billion a year for the first few years. I don't know exact figure. In one sense, parang napakalaking pera, but in another sense, if it takes you 5 to 10 minutes to get from one part of Metro Manila instead of an hour or 2, meron din naman study ang JICA kung magkano nawawala sa ekonomiya because of traffic.
Yes.
Having said that, I read in the online news that the PNR canceled three not contracts, but they were going to bid out parts of mga rota sa railway, no? And I really wonder kasi ang ginamit nila is that hindi na siya feasible. So I wonder kung ang ginagamit nila ay yung cost lang na pera, meaning kung dati it will cost 50 billion, now it costs 60 billion because yung tumaas yung bakal, or did they also consider that in the same manner that Metro Manilans should get from point A to point B to point Z in a few minutes, that yung mga taga Quezon at Bicol also deserve a efficient means of public transportation that could get them there fast and safe, di ba? So I know another committee should look into this, but in the context of the framework, again, kung ang titignan lang natin ay panay pera, peso sign, yen sign, dollar sign, yuan sign, hindi mo makikita yung tunay na picture. Kasi kung yun ang picture, dapat wala rin tayong subway. Kasi financial-wise, it'll take a few years before it becomes viable, no?
That's true. I think these things are really long-term investments, Mr. President. At kung masyado tayong masikip sa pera at ang iniisip natin yung short-term loss or leakage, then we will never make these big investments that you say will lower the cost for someone from Quezon, from Bicol, from outside Manila to travel into the capital for work. As we see in many progressive countries, they live 1 or 2 hours away and they take the train. Like maybe those who work in New York, which is a financial center, will take the train to Connecticut or New Jersey. So that type of thing requires forward planning and a lot of vision, Mr. President.
Although by the time that you and I both being not the eldest sa siblings, medyo mas maganda na buhay natin, di ba? So like my sister, Senator Pia, na-experience pa niya na hinahatid sa eskwela na nakabisikleta kasi wala pang kotse yung aking ama nun. So tayong dalawa mas a little bit more sinusundo pala nakabisikleta.
Bisikleta, pero maraming beses akong sinundun nakabisikleta. Angkas pa kami nung nagsusundo sa akin yung aming gardener, who by the way is still with us after 40 years.
So biking is good for longevity,
Yeah.
Mr. President, and that explains your love for bike lanes.
Maybe, probably.
Your Honor.
So the point I was going to make is that our parents taught us that kahit na medyo gumaganda buhay, life is hard and you should work for it. So I remember in high school, on weekends, I would take orders from neighbors and friends in BF Parañaque, would buy beef and pork in Tagaytay kasi medyo maganda profit, then ihahatid, no? And one of the plans of yung DA ngayon is buhayin yung mga kadiwa centers. And one of the more famous ones is in Taguig sa FTI. But one thing that makes the kadiwa centers doable or feasible is not only because you don't have middlemen, but because may railway nung araw from Bicol to Manila. So mas mura din yung cost nung goods. So dapat i-input din to ng PNR at ng iba nating mga ahensya na yes, you might be spending a little bit more, pero kung 10-15% less ang gagastusin ng Pilipino in Metro Manila to buy food, and kung yung mga taga Quezon at saka Bicol, tataas naman yung profit, di ba? Kasi nga, pag may trend, mas madaling i-cut out yung middleman dahil hindi ka na kailangan bumili ng truck karga mo lang dun sa trend, di ba? Tapos dun mo madaling ibaksak, no? And of course, Central Luzon is also one of our rice baskets, di ba? Yung producers talaga ng rice. So kung meron din train from there, not only to Metro Manila, but I think Clark will become like Metro Manila in what, 10-20 years, no? So anyway, I'll go to the next point, but I thank you for, for sharing the vision with me that hindi pwedeng panay pera lang yung cost, di ba?
Absolutely, Mr. President.
So now going to health, again, maganda naman yung nakasulat, pero wala akong nakita dito that would really show people na walang iwanan or yung access. I haven't seen studies in the last 5 years, but I remember when we were earlier on looking at PhilHealth, and many of the senators here, I think like Senator JV, di ba, and Senator Pia, I think even Senator Loren, basta yung mga nag-contribute talaga dun sa pagpupush ng PhilHealth. One of the statistics that were always mentioned is that something like 4 or 5 out of 10 Filipinos die without even seeing a doctor, di ba? And at least now, halimbawa sa dialysis, no? Nung araw, talagang this week, pupunta sa opisina ko, next week sa opisina mo, Senator Sani, the next week, sabi, para lang makumpleto, no? So with the packages ng PhilHealth, kahit papano, medyo mas may ginhawa ngayon yung may sakit. Pero I was shocked to find out that 40% of all barangays in the Philippines do not even have a health center, no? So what's important, I think, is that it is very clear that pagdating sa health, wala rin iwanan na kahit na walang-wala ka, you'd be able to see a doctor, you'd be able to get medicine. I remember nung pinasa natin yung mga legislation na bawal tanggihan ng kahit anong ospital kapag ka life-threatening. So a friend called me kasi nakasagasa siya at medyo tuliro siya. This long time ago to, I think. I was still in Congress. Yung first 3 terms pa lang. Pagdating ko doon sa ospital na private, na medyo mahal, pero yun ang pinakamalapit, sa sobrang tuliro nga nung nakasagasa, ang sabi niya matanda But it turned out na yung nasagasaan niya, wala pang 30. So ganun, and it was middle of the night, and it was in C6, C5. Buti na lang nga na she was okay, no, yung nasagasaan. But I had to argue with the doctor kasi ayaw niyang, I think, X-ray or MRI kasi diagnostic daw yung test. So I was telling the doctor, paano mo alam kung life-threatening o hindi kung hindi mo ida-diagnose? So nangyari sa debate namin noon, which came first, the chicken or the egg. But this was nga almost 2 decades ago. So much has happened, much improvement, much sensitive na ngayon yung mga private hospitals natin, public hospitals natin gumaganda, and the President, as a policy, wants to build more specialized hospitals outside Metro Manila. But I would want the framework to reflect that hindi lang importante na may quality health tayo, kung hindi, napaka-important, may access ka. Kasi kung hindi, pinaganda mo lang para sa mayayaman.
Yes, I completely agree with His Honor, Madam President. Unfortunately, ang nakalagay lang dito siguro na may konting relasyon dun sa binabanggit niya na napakaganda, na sana at the grassroots level natatakil yung mga problema ng ating mga kababayan sa kalusugan. Itong lingwahe na resume implementation of reforms and investments enshrined in the Universal Health Act.
Yeah.
Kasi that's a whole cornucopia of programs and policies. Pero kung hindi mo nga alam ano yung nandoon sa universal health, hindi mo alam na ang sinasabi niya, yung libreng check-up na advocacy ninyo ni Senator Pia, I join you in that because sabi niyo nga, I think it's even 5 or 6 who have not seen a doctor. So yung move nga, yung paradigm shift, Your Honor, from preventive to just curative, mas maganda sana para hindi na yung pag-fatal na, pag kailangan na ng dialysis, tsaka lang malalaman. Sana taon-taon merong test talaga si Juan de la Cruz na nakikita yung level ng kanyang asukal, yung level ng kanyang creatinine, o yung ibang tumutukoy sa kanyang mga malulubhang mga sakit. So yun unfortunately, they did not thresh out what are the implementation of reforms and investments. Pero kasama po dyan yung grassroots delivery, di ba? Sa under the PhilHealth, we're obligated to make sure that there is a because it's universal coverage, saan pupunta yung Pilipino sa Biliran o yung Pilipino sa Batanes? So yun ang sisiguraduhin po ng PhilHealth, ng gobyerno natin dito, na merong health delivery, whether it's, as you mentioned, a health center, a barangay health clinic, a rural health clinic, or a full-blown hospital. Importante may napupuntahan ang ating mga kababayan, Your Honor. So I totally agree with you there.
Let me agree with you na talking about Universal Health Act medyo encompasses this. And I'd even go further na yung the next point, which is about essential nutrition services. So parang very clear naman dito na mula sa pagkabata, or I'd even argue na buntis pa lang, no? Pinangangalagaan na natin ang kalusugan both ng nanay at saka nung magiging anak. But again, if you don't reflect the value, hindi mo makikita kagad, di ba? So like sa food, pag sinabi mong affordable, klarong-klaro na wala dapat maiwanan. So pag sa health naman, pag hindi mo sinabing accessible, so I'll take it a step further, no? When my wife, Mayor Lani, became mayor in 2010, hindi PhilHealth accredited yung mga health center. So once na PhilHealth accredited lahat, ang daming nagawa pa, like a super health center na 24 hours, na may panganakan, may laboratory, may doctor 24 hours, no? So it was easier to show people. Then ang haba ng pila para sa gamot. So we decided to take a survey and start delivering to the houses nung mga may maintenance na medicine rather than ask them to bumalik weekly or monthly, no? But because nga klaro yung value. Yung value is that mahal namin kayo. So that's why we use I love Taguig. If you love God, di ba? You should love your neighbor. So if you love your neighbor, you love your community, you love Taguig, and Taguig should love you back, no? But again, if 40% of our barangays ni walang health center, so saan mo dadalhin yung may sakit? Kaya puno yung mga ospital natin, di ba? Dahil primary healthcare units natin is not there at all, no? Which brings me to my second point. I'm actually quite curious for those of us who look and subscribe at national surveys. I actually asked to put a rider question dito sa next Pulse Asia. I hope sinama. How many Filipinos think that they are members of PhilHealth? Because every time na may kampanya, and in 2019, because I ran again for Congress sa Taguig at Pateros, siguro witness tayo lahat, di ba? Magpa-focus ka ng breakfast, maraming tao. Magpa-focus ka ng tanghali, maraming tao. Magpa-focus ka ng merienda, maraming tao. Lalo sa gabi, pag may entertainer. Pero sa gabi, pwede mo sabihin wala nang opisina. Pero yung between 9 to 5, daming tao, meaning maraming walang trabaho. But I usually ask them, ilan sa inyo dito ang walang PhilHealth? Maraming nagtataas ng kamay. But for the last, so I've been in Congress since 98, so that's more than 20 years, except for the break sa DFA. And every time magrepresent ang PhilHealth, never sila nagbibigay ng statistic below 88%. Sabi na, 90%, 100%. So I'm really curious, no? That's why I'm waiting for the budget hearing, kung ilan percent. Kasi kung totoong 100, there was a time that they were claiming 100%. Kaya nga sabi, dalawa kami ni Senator Ralph Recto, now Deputy Speaker Ralph Recto na nagsabing sa PhilHealth, kung 100% naman pala ang Pilipinong nasa PhilHealth, bakit mo kailangan pa ng card? Bigay mo na lang pangalan mo or yung number mo no? So, again, I just want to link it up with accessibility. So if we say PhilHealth, and then sa reality only 60-70% have PhilHealth, di ba? Then baliwala rin, no? Having said that, I have to acknowledge that the PhilHealth we've been talking about 15 years ago has much improved in the last 15 years. Unfortunately, the corruption has also improved over the last 15 years, and hopefully that was addressed and will be continually addressed, no?
Yes, I think that there's a lot of points made there. Nung tayo'y pumasok, much more His Honor sa Kongreso, malaki ang gastos ng local governments, nagbibigay ng free PhilHealth membership. Tapos nung napasa yung universal healthcare, lahat po ng Pilipino ay naging miyembro. Pero problema nga, yung sinasabi ninyo na hindi alam ng ating mga kababayan na miyembro na pala sila. So, I think there's a lot of improvement to be made in that respect. Dahil meron nga tayong no balance billing, pero kung hindi naman alam ng ating mga kababayan, baka nag-aantay sila na talagang hindi nila matiis yung kanilang kondisyon, tsaka lang sila pupunta ng sa isang health provider. So I think we need to change our approach on that, Mr. President. And definitely, Taguig loves you back. I think it's pretty clear.
Thank you for that. And you're always welcome there.
Yeah, we were together in 2019, Your Honor. Now that you mentioned it, we campaigned on the same stage back then.
Yes. So, moving to the next, I know I left agriculture and food, but when you say strengthen social protection, siguro sa buhay natin, ilang beses na natin narinig yung if you give a person a fish, you give him something to eat for the day, but if you teach him how to fish, then you will give him a lifetime, di ba, of food. And ang problema sa ating bansa, if you teach them how to handle public funds, something fishy comes up, at katulad ng laptops. So, on the topic of fish stocks, no, I do agree that dole-outs should be discouraged. But I also do agree when someone is so desperate at wala nang malapitan, it doesn't become a dole-out, it becomes social protection, and that's number 5, strengthen social protection. So may I ask the good sponsor if he feels that ayuda has a role to play now that the pandemic is still ongoing, and now that the prices are continue to rise, whether we talk about gasoline, transportation, sugar, bigas, etc.
Yes, certainly. I totally agree that there is still a role for ayuda. Perhaps the only debate that we should be having is ano yung type of ayuda, Your Honor. Diba? Ano yung kapalit ng ayuda? Because I guess yung ayuda nung panahon ng pandemya, walang makalabas ng bahay. So talagang kailangan cash talagang ibibigay mo. O short of that, pagkain. There's no other option outside of that. But given that now, there is freedom of movement, there's chance to for people to exercise, to have livelihoods and put up businesses. So siguro mas targeted yung ayuda, but it's still ayuda nonetheless, and it's still a form of social protection. And social protection, of course, takes many forms, Your Honor. No, for the poorest of the poor, it will be the 4Ps. But social protection is also needed for senior citizens, for persons with disabilities, for people whose employment is not sufficient, those underemployed, Mr. President. So, ano yung ayuda natin sa kanila? Anong maitutulong natin sa kanila? I think these are all valid questions that you have raised, Mr. President.
I thank you for that, and I consider you a ally in our struggle to get what our people need. Whether we call it ayuda, whether we call it assistance, o kung ano man tawag natin, tama ka, kung ano man form, no? Whether yan ay bigas, educational assistance, o cash,
Pautang.
in general, pautang, credit, di ba? Kailangan ng tao ng ayuda, okay? Like anything else, when it's elections, we tell people kung ano ang proposal natin, free education. How long did it take before we got to free education? I'll go to that later on, no? So, ang 10,000 ayuda, na ibigay natin yan sa Bayanihan 1, except 2 gives. And the reason, tama ka, Madam Senate President and dear chairperson ng Finance Committee, that naka-lockdown kasi, and yung administrative cost na hanapin mo pa isa-isa, napakahirap at pag nadoble na triple, no? Having said that, di ba sabi nga nila, democracy, what's that saying about democracy, di ba? Is the worst kind of, it's the worst system of government except for all others.
Yeah, I think that's Churchill.
Something like that, di ba?
Present, something to that effect, yes.
Yeah. I knew basta't UK-based, you would know it. No? So, ganun din naman sa ayuda. Wala tayong duda na if there's a better system, bakit hindi? Pero kung magiging napakabigat ng administrative cost, so in fact, ang pinopropose ko nga, magkaroon ng app. Diba? So kung kailangan mo ng gamot, nakakita ka ng doktor, bakit hindi isubmit sa DOH yung reseta, tapos padadalang ka ng GCash? Diba? Ang daming, kung yung mga mangloloko nakakapaggamit ng social media at saka WhatsApp, Viber, GCash, bakit ang gobyerno hindi maayos? And SSS was able to deliver tens of billions to millions of people during the pandemic. That's why I asked them to share with the other departments how they did it. So my point there, I wanted to emphasize that we need more discussion kasi sinabi ng Secretary of Finance, our good friend and very, very able idol ng marami sa economics na si Secretary Diokno, but I disagree with him na if he was quoted correctly, no, na walang role yung ayuda. Because nga, unlike ordinary hard times, extraordinary ang hirap ng tao ngayon. So pag extraordinary ang hirap, extraordinary ang problema, kailangan extraordinary din yung solusyon. And in fact, if you look at the budget submitted to Congress, maraming ayuda doon. AIX is ayuda sa DSWD. SLP, Sustainable Livelihood Program sa DSWD is ayuda. MAIC, Medical Assistance is ayuda.
School vouchers.
School vouchers are
ayuda.
ayuda.
Present, yes.
But as you said, in a manner, it's targeted. And to many people that I talk to, whether it's 10,000, 5,000, 50,000, as long as their needs are met. So ang tinitingnan naman natin dito, hindi yung tamad, hindi yung isusugal niya, hindi yung ibibili niya ng alak, but ang tinitingnan natin dito yung tinamaan lang talaga ng pandemic. And of course, the transport sector, specifically tricycle and jeepneys, then nung tumaas ang presyo ng gasolina, taxi drivers, are very, very hard hit, di ba? Before the face-to-face classes and lockdown, walang sumasakay ng jeepney, tricycle. Tapos, nung may sumasakay na, limited. And then, hindi naman nagbago yung presyo ng gasolina, tumaas pa, di ba? So, may mga ganun sitwasyon talaga na wala talagang tatakbuhan no? I talked to a jeepney operator na nakabili na siya ng bahay and I'm not sure kung 5, 7 na yung jeep niya. Itong pandemic, nabenta lahat, narimata lahat kasi hindi pa fully paid yung bahay. And I remember when President Arroyo had the cheaper NFA rice, Lani was still a member of Congress and she would go around with the caravan. And she noticed someone na ang lalayo ng barangay nandun parate. Pero parating binibili 1 kilo lang. So she confronted the guy that, do you know my limit, etc., etc., bakit ka sunod ng sunod? And it's good na nakausap niya kasi ang sabi sa kanya, ma'am, mangingisda lang ako at wala na masyadong isda sa Laguna Lake at naghihiram lang ako ng bangka. So, from 7 days a week to 5 days a week, minsan 2 days a week, may mga anak ako, kung hindi dahil sa kanila nagpakamatay na ako. But because of them, kailangan kumain, kaya sinusundan ko yung social media kung nasaan yung caravan para lang makabili ng 1 kilo. So I think these are examples of stories, including yung stories ng mga OFWs natin na napauwi, na may utang pa, stories ng mga tricycle drivers na minsan hindi mo nakikita kapag ang tinitignan mo lang ay statistics or tinitignan mo lang ay yung GDP, GNP, etc. No? Ang daling sabihin talaga, don't give dole-outs, di ba? Pero kung yung mga tao wala nang kinakain, so one of our good friends, di ba, former Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Piñol, who I follow sa Facebook, and I agree with a lot of things he said. One time nag-post siya, hindi kailangan ayuda, kailangan turuan sila magtanim. I wanted to post na, sir, we need both. Kasi kahit turuan mo magtanim, saan sila bibili ng seeds halimbawa para itanim? 'Di ba? Kasi yun ang complaint ng Pilipino, parang seminar na nga, naka-10 seminar na, wala namang puhunan, paano ka mag-uumpisa, no? So my point lang dyan sa strengthen social protection, 4Ps only covers those who were in dire situations before the pandemic. Pero dumami ang kanilang ranggo na hindi na kaya nung programa ngayon during the pandemic at sa pagtaas ng presyo. So we have to have a program parallel to 4Ps, maybe not as long term. And we have to be able to find the poorest of the poor. So agreeing with you na targeted, sino yung hindi kumakain ng 3 beses na sa isang araw? Sino yung may sakit na kaya hindi man lang makalabas? Sino yung hindi man lang makabili ng mask tapos pag lumabas ng bahay, sisitahin ng tanod o ng polis na hindi mo sinusunod yung mask mandate? If we can find those people and deliver the ayuda in one form or the other, we'll be in much better shape.
Yes, Mr. President, definitely. I see where the gentleman is going with that, and it's not everything can be captured by statistics, as he mentioned, and there are real cases of people who need the help of the government.
And I'd agree with you, no, at least with the framework. Kung mabibigyan mo ng trabaho rather than ayuda. Napakarami kong nakakausap pag nabibigyan ko ng ayuda from the private sector na, boss, may trabaho ba? Di ba? Kung may trabaho, hindi na nila kukunin yung ayuda. Ang problema nga, walang ang trabaho o walang negosyo, no? Or for example, no, we've been doing projects between 3,500 to 10,000 pesos for sari-sari stores. Maraming sari-sari stores during the lockdown naubos yung paninda because they used it for themselves. And they were successful. I talked to someone in Baguio, lahat ng anak niya napaaral niya sa kanyang sari-sari store. Apo niya yung kasamang magbantay. But during the pandemic, na nagkaroon pa ng COVID yung katabi, and this was at the height no, nung wala pang bakuna, so nagsara daw yung buo nilang kalye. So hindi na siya makabenta, wala pa silang pera. So they got high on their own supply, ika nga. So kung ano yung benta nila, yun ang ginamit nila. So by the time na she wants to reopen, wala nang puhunan. So ang point ko naman, kung 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, kung pauutangin mo pa, mas malaki pa yung administrative cost, 'di ba? Unless we can hire lahat ng nagpa 5-6 sa ating bansa. Kasi lahat ng nagpa 5-6 sa ating bansa, matyaga magmotor at kina house to house or stall to stall yung mga may utang sa kanila. But yung mga ating kahit mga microfinance natin, unless you're based in the palengke, 'di ba? They don't do it that way. So if we loan sari-sari store 3,500, pero mag-hire tayo ng tao na taga-singil sa kanila, baka mas mahal pa eh. Tsaka yung COA, aangal pa eh. Pero pag ginawa mong grant yun, madali namang makita eh. Pa-certify mo lang sa barangay that before the pandemic, nandyan na yung sari-sari store, di ba? Ang hilig naman natin mag-selfie eh. So most owners ng sari-sari store, meron naman silang selfie nung kanilang tindahan. So I think there's a room to be creative in all of this, no?
Yes, certainly. In fact, the document says we have to be creative in our approaches. So I think they should consult the gentleman from Taguig when it comes to being creative in policy, given his vast experience, Mr. President.
So last 2 points. The life work of your father, who I had the privilege of not only viewing when I was following my father around, but also working with in this chamber. I don't know if it was even before he was UP president or and very active sa yung samahan ng top 10 universities sa US, no? Or was it always his life work, or did it start in UP na education talaga naging passion niya, no? So dun sa number 6, face-to-face education, it's not only face-to-face education. I think it was the time of Secretary Jesly Lapus where education for all became the mantra, no? More or less, no? So again, I'd like the portion on education to reflect quality and access. Kasi kung walang quality education, everyone has access, may problema. Pero kung quality nga, pero ang pwede lang naman mag-aral, mayaman, baliwala rin. Di ba? So going to that, I have seen, to tell you the truth, I was actually shocked. Akala ko joke. And you know naman, I like jokes. Pero meron palang department order talaga ang DepEd that the conduct of extracurricular activities shall be strictly prohibited. That's Department Order number 34. So let me issue this challenge now to everyone in DepEd who made this order. Tanggalin nyo muna extracurricular activities nyo bago nyo gawin sa mga estudyante. Why do I say this? I've had the pleasure the last few weekends to watch my pamangkin play football dito sa McKinley. And my brother Ren, who's more of your age, both Sunny and Ren are younger than I am. Sinasabi nga ni Ren, iba talaga yung access ng mga mayayaman or may kaya sa activities. So napakaliliit pa lang, may specialize sila, 3-on-3, mas maliit yung goal, but they have professional coaches. And nasa field yung mga Philippine team na mga women, they have imported coaches, men. They have international competition already ongoing at a young age, no? Football to, nung bata tayo, almost every school had a basketball and volleyball training, part of their PE. I remember during impeachment of President Arroyo, I was invited in St. Jude. Hindi ko makalimutan kasi pinagalitan sila ba't ako inimbita na napakalapit sa Malacanang. And nung nakita ko na may dance studio, nakita ko may karate, taekwondo, kita ko na may chess club, nakita ko na may advance sa computer, sabi ko talagang pagkabata pa lang, ang layo na nung mayaman at mahirap. So eto ang problema ko dito sa DepEd order. Yung konting debate club, chess club, karate club, I don't know if scouting is considered an extracurricular activity. Di ba? Kasi wala naman sa curriculum. I don't mean to put you in a spot and I will not, but pag extracurricular, tama ba? Wala sa curriculum.
Well, I think much of the fun I had as a student was in the extracurricular activities, Your Honor. I mean, playing basketball,
Yeah.
playing soccer,
And that
playing
was the time,
softball.
And if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, that was the time for us where music, where arts, where sports was part of the curriculum. Pero ngayon with STEM, many of the schools in Metro Manila na wala ng lupa have, if not eliminated, grossly neglected or minimized yung arts class, music class, and the number of sports or physical education classes they have. So when you say extracurricular, if I'm correct na it's outside the curriculum, di ba? Kasi pag sinabi mong extra-constitutional, sa labas ng constitution. So let me just make that point that ang ganda ng framework, face-to-face. Pero the reality on the ground is that before the pandemic, napakarami natin schools na 2 shifts and 3 shifts. So with the pandemic, kulang tayo sa building. So may mga ibang schools which will have to do probably instead of 7 to 3 or 8 to 4 o'clock, will have to do like 6 to 10, 10 to 2, 2 to 6. Or maybe 8 to 12 and 12 to 6, di ba? Mag-ano sila mag-shifting, no? So, ang problema mo ngayon bilang magulang, anong pagagawa mo sa mga anak mo in between that? So, kung may extracurricular activities, may scouting ka, may debate club, may chess club, whatever, no? gagawin mo, alam mong productive. Unless, ang gusto ng DepEd, mag-TikTok na lang yung mga bata. Di ba? So, again, my point here is that the values should be reflected in the framework and the implementation has to be reflective of the framework and the value. So again, I'll put that, we'll ask the Committee on Basic Ed to look into Department Order number 34. And ulit, I will ask DepEd officials, kayo ba, tinanggal nyo yung extracurricular activities nyo at ngayon gusto nyo yung mga estudyante, no? To be fair to the principals and teachers, etc., I don't think they agree with this, no? Noong 1987, after the EDSA revolution, one of President Aquino's acts was to make the high school free. So during the Marcos administration, ginawang libre yung elementary, and I think isa tayo sa una, at least sa region, na to start to plant the seeds, di ba, na ang edukasyon ay libre. And the criticism kay President Cory noon was that we couldn't afford it. Na if we do that, if we elementary pa noon, brother, I was in high school already, no? And I was campaigning against the Constitution. So I was looking at these things, no? And yun nga, parang it was a promise that's good, but the problem is, can we afford it? Kaya in the first few years of free high school, maraming mass promotion. Kasi nga, we didn't have enough classroom, teachers, etc. But decades later, it's a blessing, and then comes President Duterte na, and I think the gentleman from Aurora is the author and
One of the
principal
authors,
sponsor,
one of the
no? One of the
authors,
authors and principal sponsor nung
The
batas.
sponsor was Senator Bam and Senator Cheese.
Yes, di ba,
They
nung
sponsored, opo.
nung sa education, and before that I was the author naman nung Scholar ng Bayan.
That's
na
right, I
yung
remember
top
that.
10,
When
no?
you were majority leader, yes, I remember that.
And you supported me then.
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
Then K to 12 came along, and I had the privilege of working with and against your father, because dalawa lang kaming senador na may ayaw nito, and sabi nga ni Senator Ralph during that time, this will be an additional 500 billion pesos, 250 from the pockets of government a year, and 250 billion from the pockets of the parents, plus another 2 years bago sila makatrabaho. But of course, your father and many academicians who supported him gave very compelling reasons why we need it. But yung isang pinangako nung buong machinery sa amin is that dahil ililipat ang general education courses sa senior high school at
Babawasan dapat yung koleyo,
babawasan
Mr.
yung
President.
koleyo
Oh,
ng 1 year.
4 to 3. Opo.
Yes. And in fact, some universities in the US, even without this, talaga namang -1 year.
Sa
diba?
UK po, the standard undergraduate course is 3 years. Opo.
Yes.
Because they have a 12-year
So for example,
education
no,
cycle.
hindi ako agree na tanggalin ang Rizal Studies. Pero anong difference ng i-take up mo sa senior high school sa first year college? Pareho age mo, di ba? And Rizal Studies is Rizal Studies. It's just a matter of picking professors or teachers who have passion to study Rizal. And I don't know if it's timing or coincidence, basta't bayani pinag-usapan, pasok Robin Hood Padilla, no? So
Bonifacio naman ho ang idol ata ni
I think
ni
dalawa.
Idol.
Sa maraming aspeto si Bonifacio sa tapang, sa ibang aspeto si Jose Rizal.
Alam na ho
pero
yun, alam na ho.
Sa lengguwahe, di ba? Because Rizal could speak a lot of languages, no? So again, no, napakahirap na magpa-graduate ngayon. And even if libre, and I again commend all of you for that law. But remember, tuition is only 40 to 60% ng gastos. The other 40 to 60% is yung pamasahe, kung hybrid ngayon, yung pang-internet, load, baon, yung sa group work, etc. No? So maybe this will fall under improved school governance at all level. But again, I would be more comfortable. I mean, ang daming agree ako dito, ha. I don't mean to keep telling you and our colleagues and this administration kung anong wala. Kasi maraming maganda, di ba? Like leverage digital channel to improve education and learning, maganda yan, di ba? But yun nga, I think there's so much we can do para mabawasan ng gastos ang atin mga kababayan. The other thing that was promised to us is that, if you remember, if we had mga barkada from Don Bosco when we were in high school, nung tayo na sa high school, uso nun yung mga mobile di ba? And tayo, ang practical arts natin ay yung mga handicraft, di ba? Then may, at least sa akin in my school, may one sem na mag-shift, yung mga babae magpa-practical arts, kami mag-home economics, matututong manahe.
Maswerte ho kayo,
Diba?
Your Honor, may kasama kayong babae kasi kami,
Yes. Yes.
all boys
all
school.
boys kayo.
Yeah.
Oo. Blessed kami. Blessed din sila na may kasama din silang mga
Yes, yeah.
lalaki.
Good point.
Oo. Actually, mas blessed sila kasi 3:1 yung ratio. So, mas in demand sila. No? Having said that, we looked up to Don Bosco kasi pag pumupunta sa parties, ang projects nila, yung strobe lights, yung mirror ball, yung mixers, di ba? May electronics, electrical, sila. So, if you wanted to become an electrician, you didn't need to go to college. You can go to a tech box school and get both the quality education of a quality high school, but also para ka na rin naka-enroll sa yung test na nung araw na yon.
That's true.
So, ang pangako sa amin sa K-12 ay popondohan nila to. So, kung mag-science track ka, meron mga laboratories yung mga school. Kung let's say, multimedia, etc., may computers yung mga school. Kung ikaw ay, let's say, gusto mo electrical automotive, may garahe yung mga school. In fact, di ba sa US, meron silang, what do you call it, driver's ed ba? Di ba yung tuturuan ka magmaneho and nasa high school ka kung kukuha ka
Not familiar, Your Honor. Yeah.
ng lisensya. I mean, I'm familiar because I like watching those
Practical skills. Opo.
romantic comedies, movies, di ba? And there's always kung papasa sila o hindi dung driver's ed, no? So sa atin, you know, motorcycle and pagdadrive, yung pagchuchuper is a marangal na trabaho, but I really yung marami sa kanila tatakas yung kotse or kung papayagan ng amo na gamitin, mag-park, di ba? But ang point ko, Your Honor, is that there's so much we can do para nga pag-graduate nila. Kasi ang promise sa atin nun, pag may K-12 ka, you don't need to go to college. And ang tinitingnan yung Germany. And of course, there's two aspects, the actual education and the attitude. The attitude kasi sa Germany, they don't look for your diploma, they look at your skills, di ba? Kaya nga after yung high school, nag-apprenticeship, tapos yun, pwede kang sa accounting department kahit hindi ka accountant. But also because quality yung education nila. They were taught that in high school. So, hindi sila grade 1 sa knowledge pag-start nila dun sa school. Sa atin, wala pabawas ng pabawas yung laman ng school kasi padami ng padami ang estudyante, and left and right nagsasara ngayon yung mga high school. So I won't continue because I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know Senator Sani, just like his father, is you know, a super advocate of education, but I'd like to point out that baliwala nga yung framework kung wala yung value, and lalong baliwala kung may ganyang klaseng mga order ang DepEd. Diba? So, okay.
May I just
Yes, of
a
course.
short rejoinder, Mr. President? I think the gentleman makes a good and timely reminder to our education leaders, decision makers, policy makers, that there are unfulfilled promises of the K-12 program, which is roughly a decade old. At nabanggit po niya, yung sabi natin, magiging employable na yung ating mga kabataan after 12 years of basic education. Pangalawa, yung pangako ng CHED, not the current CHED, but the CHED na nakaupo nun, na yung they will exert efforts to shorten. And as mentioned nga, yung mga general education na take up na or pinasok na dun sa grades 10 to 12 or 11 to 12, dapat tanggalin na po sa kolehiyo. So I think it's a timely reminder to our authorities that we have not delivered on these promises. And third is the need, because we have these tracks for K-12, di ba? Yung STEM na banggit nyo, yung music and sports track, and then yung tech voc track, and then the track of those who will go to college. So there's at least 3 or 4 tracks, Mr. President. And ang tanong is, meron bang distinction between these tracks as promised, di ba? As conceptualized. Pero parang sabi nyo nga, sa Manila, wala nang sports fields or athletic facilities. So, san yung ating, saan nila ipapractice yung kanilang sports kung sakali? Where will they pursue that? Although, I know the gentleman and his sister and myself worked on the National Academy of Sports. So, may konting ganong outlet. Pero, that's really for elite athletes. Paano po yung mga lower level athletes, no, Mr. President? So thank you for that, Your Honor.
Actually, I will now reveal my hidden agenda, that this is a prelude to me asking you and, of course, the special ate to the President, no, Senator Amy, during the budget hearing, that this framework and this value should be reflected sa budget. No? So, I apologize if I'm taking up some of your time now, but then, bawas naman to pagdating ng budget hearing. And I agree with you, except it includes the present CHED, because I actually had a debate with CHED Chairman Popoy de Vera in the cabinet when I was in DFA. Dahil pinag-uusapan namin yun sa kabinete, and I butted in and told the President Duterte, dalawa lang kami ni Senator Trillanes ang nag-object dyan, at eto pa nga ako. And Popoy proudly said, Chairman Popoy, that, "Sir, nabawasan na ng 1 SEM." And I told him, "Sir, yung 1 SEM, 1 year pa rin ang delay mo sa pag-graduate, lalo kung may board exam yan. Kasi hindi naman nila ipapattern yung board exam dun sa 3.5 years mo eh. Ang tinitignan sa Pilipinas, year." No? And talagang gulat ako dyan kasi nung nasa UP ako, 15 to 18 ang load eh. Hindi ka underload kung 15 units. That's why nga tumagal ako ng 5 years instead of 4 years. Kasi ang sarap ng naka 15, wala pang Netflix nun. Pero merong 1 week na magre-rent ka ng Betamax o VHS. So uubusin mo yon, di ba? Oo. Having said that, I don't know why it was such a big issue for them na tanggalin yung isa pang SEM when many universities now have senior high school naman. Kasi nung una naintindihan ko kasi yung professors nila, yung bottom line and everything. No? But let's go into that during the budget hearing or sa committee. But again, no, this is the legacy of your dad and kung siya may commitment sa akin, ako naman may commitment din sa kanya to make it work.
With your permission, Mr. President, I just remember there's another unfulfilled promise of the K-12, or at least the educational system, is the ladderized nature. We promised people that there would be a seamless transition for those who, let's say, kapos kayo, pagkatapos mo mag-high school, magtrabaho ka muna. Pero at any time, pwede kang bumalik para kumuha ng vocational course. Tapos, pagkapos ka ulit, yung vocational course mo, makakredit doon sa bachelor's course mo kung sakali mong gusto mong bumalik. So yun yung seamless transition. That's another unfulfilled mandate or promise of our educational system. I just remembered because of the points you raised, Your Honor.
Thank you very much for that. So I'll go now to my last point, which is on the enhanced bureaucratic efficiency. If we can start the discussion now, but maybe we'll pick it up during the budget deliberation. So let me start with the constitutional basis. No? So Section 24 in the article of legislature, which is, if I'm not mistaken, Article 6, appropriations, revenue, or tariff bills authorize increase of public debt, bills of local application, and private bills shall originate exclusively in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with said amendment. We copied that from the U.S. Constitution for, I don't know if blindly, but of course the U.S. had a different reason for allowing it, for all of this to start in the House, no, rather than in the Senate, no. This was part of the negotiations of the states in coming up with a Senate and a House that will represent. So part of their negotiations was, the gentleman probably knows it, but just for the record. So sabi ng mga bigger states like California, dapat marami kaming congressman at senador. So sabi naman ng maliliit na states like Iowa, paano naman kami? So hindi kami equal states. So they made a decision na 2 senators per state pero maraming congressman per state. So sabi naman ng mga congressman, pero sandali, kung public debt yan or pera or utang or tax, sa amin dapat manggaling. Kasi paano kung pumayag lahat ng maliit na state na senador na mataas ang tax? Paano kaming malalaking state like New York and California? And New York was their industrial backbone, if I'm not mistaken, in the early part of the US, di ba? Or what do you call this? Yung mga tabing ilog like the Mississippi, di ba? Yan yung mga ano nila. So tayo, kinopya natin. I don't know if there's a specific reason, but it's there. And you have to relate that with Section 29, which states that no money shall be paid out of the treasury except in pursuance of an appropriation made by law. So they use the word except, meaning kailangan may appropriation, but there's no exception to this rule. Any money of government spent without an appropriation is a criminal act, is an unconstitutional act, di ba? So anything we spend, kailangan may appropriation. So kung nasa NEP yan, okay, nasa JA, kung wala, we have to pass a supplemental budget or some kind of authority. But now, can I relate that to Section 20 of the Executive Department? The President may contract or guarantee foreign loans on behalf of the Republic of the Philippines with prior concurrence of the Monetary Board and subject to such limitations as may be provided by law. Then it tells what the Monetary Board should do. And of course, the Monetary Board has been doing a good job in managing our debt, in looking at the scale, etc. So I mentioned this to you in one of our coffee breaks, if you remember. I just want to start the discussion. We don't have to continue today. So ang tanong ko po ganito, ni piso, ni sentimo, yung mga bata ngayon hindi na nakita yung sentimo o 5, tayo nakita pa natin yun, no? Ni isang sentimo ay hindi pwedeng gastusin na walang appropriation. Pero ang ginagawa ng Pangulo, at hindi lang itong Pangulo na to, pero lahat ng Pangulo, nangungutang, tapos gagastusin yung pinangutang. Tapos ilalagay sa GAA na wala na tayong magagawa kasi nagpirmahan na ng kontrata, and then sasabihin yung batas na yon ang nag-authorize. So ang problema natin, Mr. Chair, kung tama po ako, and again, no, as provided by law, so baka hindi ako updated sa mga ibang batas, but ito po ang ibig ko sabihin diyan. So for example, no, kung ang priority natin agriculture at nangutang ang ating mahal na Pangulo, halimbawa nasa Singapore na ba siya today or nasa Indonesia pa?
Arrived today in
diba?
Singapore, Mr. President.
So but I'll use Japan as an example kasi they're one of our creditors, co-developers or partners in development, no? So kung lima nasa Japan siya at sinabi niya, aabutin ng 10 to 20 years kung yung programa niyo sa irrigation ngayon. Pero pautangin na lang namin kayo ng 10 billion pesos, tapusin niyo na yung irrigation problem in your next 6 years. We will irrigate your finances in this next 6 years. So, I don't think any one of us here will say, wag natin utangin yun, lalo kung mababa interest, may grace period and everything, no? Pero halimbawa, what's a good example of a waste of money? No? Di ba? Halimbawa nga, no? Biglang pag-review natin ng loans ngayon ay meron 5 billion pesos to study whether or not we should have ayuda or not. I don't mind a 1 million peso study or a study on ayuda, but let's say 5 billion, tapos kinagat natin yon, wala tayong kilalaman dito. I mean, we spend days and weeks and hours studying the budget, tapos isang pirma lang nila. Hindi naman natin hindi pwedeng ipasa sa budget yon kasi dati, pag hindi mo pinasa, it's between you and the creditor. But most of the contracts now have an arbitration clause to a third party. So for example, when President Aquino said no to the dredging of the Laguna Lake, ilan bilyon ang binayaran, ang mukhang babayaran natin dahil matatalo tayo o natalo tayo sa arbitration case. Ganun din sa North Rail, kung hindi nakapag-negotiate ang Duterte administration, daan milyon kung hindi bilyon ang babayaran natin, no? So I think as an institution, we should take a look at this, no? Or let's simplify the issue. Can the executive borrow money and spend the money and get the authorization after? Yeah, I'm one of those who are not that great in making digest a law school, Your Honor. So I think you can, the chairman of the Committee on Finance can simplify it, but I'd like to pursue this issue later on. And I think it will be really part of the enhanced bureaucratic efficiency and also of, sorry, it's part of the fiscal management. I apologize. I was on the same page, but I'm actually referring to pursue sound fiscal management, no? So meaning the chairman of the Committee on Finance is a walking Wikipedia, encyclopedia, Google on finance. But that is,
I wish, Mr. President.
no, but that is if dumaan sa'yo sa budget hearing. Pero kung biglang nasa budget na lang at inutang pala yun 4 years ago, and then may grace period, so hindi nila nilagay sa budget kaagad, biglang magugulat na lang tayo na meron palang ganun babayarin, no?
I think that's a very good point, and I hope I understood all the nuances of the argument of the gentleman, so I'll try to rephrase it. He's saying that the executive must get approval from the legislature before contracting indebtedness or contracting loans.
Yes.
Is that the case?
Yes.
Because rather than contract the loan and get the approval when he's already paying the paying the loan back in the form of what is appropriated year to year under foreign indebtedness. Something like that.
I'm proven correct. You're much more articulate than me. You articulated it very well.
I'm worried I might miss something there,
No, no.
Mr. President.
I'll follow the rule, the one of the things in debate, di ba, yung argumentum ad absurdum. You bring the debate or the argument to the absurd. Okay. Hindi mapasa ng presidente yung budget. Submit a zero budget. Utangin mo yung buong 5 trillion, may grace period ng 1 year, in the next year, submit the budget na nandun yung utang. Wala na tayong magagawa. May kontrata na siya. Di ba?
Yes.
So yes, the monetary board is a check because nga when President Aquino inherited the government, when President Aquino, Cory Aquino became president, she inherited a large loan and there were questions whether behestang loan, etc. There were criticisms of her na kung hiningi niya sa US Congress yung na-condone to,
Condonation.
mako-condone, hindi niya hiningi. And then there were criticisms that lahat kayo, tinitira niyo yung Marcos sa PD 1177, yung automatic appropriation ng loan. Pero nung kayo nakaupo, hindi nyo naman repeal yung 1177. All of those arguments. In my time in Congress, 2 beses lang to napag-usapan. When the Asian crisis came, and we had to talk about the loan, and I think the time might come that so that's the only time I remember that it was a real discussion. I mean, as in everyone was talking about it. Now, we're getting there because of the amount of our loan, but tama po si Secretary Diokno na pag tinignan mo compared sa ibang bansa, manageable tayo. But ang problema, we don't know eh. Ano ba yung pandemic? 1 buwan na lang ba? Or 5 taon pa? Ano ba tong presyo ng gasolina? Nag-peak na ba yan? Or lalo pa bang tataas? Diba? So, there is a possibility that, you know, we might be overwhelmed by the discussions on the loan, not by the loan, but the discussions. And I think a good way to start this administration is really to see whether or not any president can borrow and appropriate money in violation of Section 29 by simply putting it in the budget na wala na tayong magagawa later on. No? So again, Madam Senate, to our dear Senate President Subiri and to the chairperson, I just wanted to begin that discussion. This is just a framework, as you said, and kanina sabi ko, I want to get from letter A, Angara, to B, and to Z. So nandyan na si Subiri. So I think nasa letter Z na. So I think I have to end my interpellation.
Thank you very much, Your Honor, for really running the gamut, literally A to Z and Z to A, pagdating ho sa topic. But I just like to mention that there is that automatic appropriations law under PD 1177, the father of the current president. So that may be a reason why the loans no longer need the approval of Congress when they are contracted or maybe when they're paid back, because they're automatically appropriated under that presidential decree. And as you correctly mentioned, it was not repealed by successive administrations because they found it useful to have that freedom or latitude in contracting and paying loans. And I suppose that's compliant with Section 20, which you also mentioned, of Article 7 of the Constitution, where the President may contract foreign loans, blah, 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 subject to such limitations as may be provided by law, Your Honor.
Yeah. And you remember when you were a freshman member of Congress, no? Magkano budget natin nun? Was it
I think we just
300
passed the trillion mark, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Your
trillion
Honor.
mark. And
Yeah.
when I started, it was what, like 300. So dati, wala ka na mapipiga sa budget, yun lang
That's
talaga
true.
eh.
That's
But ngayon with 5 trillion budget, tapos yung growth natin, yung potential natin sa Pilipino. So nung araw, kahit na nangyayari to, limited din ang pwede mong utangin eh. But ngayon, left and right yung offer sa atin na mangutang. Diba? So that's why I think this has to be discussed thoroughly. And the gentleman from Aurora, you know, his expertise in the budget and his being chair of the Committee on Finance is not an accident. May purpose ang Panginoon sa atin lahat. So I'm not saying it's our generation or this Congress that will solve that riddle. There's no doubt, I think, that it's considered legal right now. But ang question ko lang, are we circumventing the Constitution? And did we do it out of convenience? Is it time to medyo put it into check? I remember the time na the BICAM had little room. Talagang kukunti lang.
Yes.
But as you see in the Duterte administration, no, na talagang pag nakita ng Senado, ng Congress na malito, nililipat talaga natin yung pondo. So nag-iba na rin eh. So it might be time to put extra checks and balances to make sure nga na future generations hindi natin i-dump sa future generation lahat ng uutangin natin ngayon just to survive. So again, let me end this interpellation with thanking you and reminding you, my kababata, na Brad, walang iwanan.
Salamat.
Thank you,
Salamat
Mr.
ng marami.
Senate President.
Napakagandang interpellation. I thank the gentleman for his kind words, and I definitely work with him. We see him as a co-worker rather than as an adversary in these matters, definitely, and his experience will help us in the budget debates to come. So thank you very much to the gentleman from Taguig, Mr. President.
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. President.
May I ask for a minute suspend? I move for a minute suspension.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 3. So move, Mr. President.
Till tomorrow, right?
Yes, until tomorrow, Mr. President.
Yes,
as,
so there's a motion to suspend Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 3 to be discussed once again tomorrow. There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to consider proposed Senate Resolution Number 173, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution Numbers 174, 181, and 186. I so move, Mr. President.
If there's no objection, the motion is approved. Consideration of proposed Senate Resolution number 173, taking consideration proposed Senate Resolutions number 174, 181, 186 is now in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary, please proceed.
Resolution commending Dr. Bernadette J. Madrid, a pediatrician and children's rights champion, for being the lone Filipino and woman in the 2022 Ramon Magsaysay Awardees.
Yes, Mr. President, the status of the measure is that we are in the period of sponsorship. I ask that we recognize our distinguished Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros, to sponsor this resolution.
Our distinguished
Deputy
Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros, is recognized.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. It is my honor and privilege to sponsor the Senate resolution commending Dr. Bernadette J. Madrid, a pediatrician and children's rights champion, for being the lone Filipino and lone woman in the 2022 Ramon Magsaysay awardees, or among the 2022 Ramon Magsaysay awardees. On August 31st, 2022, pediatrician and children's rights advocate Dr. Bernadette J. Madrid was named one of the 4 recipients of the 2022 Ramon Magsaysay Awards, which recognize greatness of spirit shown through selfless service to the peoples of Asia. Since 1997, Dr. Madrid has been serving as a director of the Philippine General Hospital Child Protection Unit, or PGH-CPU, the first emergency unit for abused children in the country. The PGH-CPU provides for social, legal, and medical health services for abused kids and their families, and had served over 27,639 Filipino children by the end of 2021. Dr. Madrid is also the executive director of the Child Protection Network Foundation and oversees the network of women and children protection units. The network has over 123 units across the country, providing services to over 119,695 children and teenagers, as well as 30,912 women. 5 years ago, Mr. President, Dr. Madrid assisted my office in securing the testimony of the child witnesses in the tragic murder of 17-year-old Kian de los Santos. It is a testament to her enduring work as a stalwart champion and defender of every Filipino child. The Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation cited Dr. Madrid for her unassuming and steadfast commitment to a noble and demanding advocacy. Her leadership in running a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary effort in child protection that is admired in Asia, and her competence and compassion in devoting herself to seeing that every abused child lives in a healing and nurturing society. My most heartfelt congratulations to Dr. Madrid, whose work as a doctor, educator, social leader, and advocate of the rights and welfare of every Filipino child is worthy of Asia's premier prize and the highest honor. And by the way, Mr. President, as a point of parliamentary inquiry, we passed in the 18th Congress a resolution conferring the Senate Medal of Excellence upon Filipinos who are awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the Pulitzer Prize, the A.M. Turing Award, an Olympic medal or the Ramon Magsaysay Award. So may I ask the good Senate President and Senate Majority Leader if Dr. Madrid will also be given the Senate Medal of Excellence. Dagan salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader.
Yes,
By the
Mr.
way,
President.
before we move forward and continue, she's also a candidate for the Senate Medal of Recognition because she's
Of
a
excellence,
Magsaysay of
yeah.
Excellence.
Yes.
Because she's a Magsaysay awardee. So we'll also maybe in another day welcome a resolution to that effect as long as there's a unanimous vote from
Yes,
everyone.
in fact, Mr. President, this representation and Senator Antiveros talked about it, and because it is now just a regular resolution, but in the future, I think we will welcome a resolution for Senate,
The Senate
Medal of Excellence.
So when she does visit us, hopefully soon, we could give her the Medal of Excellence and this, of course, resolution of the Senate honoring her, a distinguished lady.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Yes, and we will do that. Mr. President, next on the list to sponsor the measure is the distinguished gentleman from the great province of Cavite, Senator Ramon Bong Revilla Jr. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
To our colleague, the distinguished gentleman from the great province of Cavite, the historic and great province of Cavite, Senator Ramon Bong Revilla Jr. is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. It has always been the tradition of the Senate to give recognition and commendation to outstanding Filipinos for their feats of bringing honor, pride, and glory. And today is no exception. Mr. President, my esteemed colleagues, it is my privilege to sponsor proposed Senate Resolution number 173 commending Dr. Bernadette J. Madrid, a pediatrician and children's right advocate, for being the lone Filipino and woman in the roster of 2022 Ramon Magsaysay awardees, the Asian equivalent of the Nobel Prize. Her transformative work in integrating child protection into health infrastructure in the country is luminous proof of Filipino brilliance, passion, and dedication. Dr. Madrid is an accomplished clinician, a prolific educator, and a woman of excellence. She has always been in service for the Filipino people. She is honored for championing the welfare of children and women, for providing medical, legal, and psychosocial care to them. Mr. President, we live in very uncertain times brought about by the pandemic. Now more than ever, we need leaders, model citizens who can give us hope, and we, especially our youth, can emulate, and precisely Dr. Madrid is worthy of the commendation. The Ramon Magsaysay Foundation citation for Dr. Madrid reads as her unassuming and steadfast commitment to a noble and demanding advocacy, her leadership in running a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary effort in child protection that is admired in Asia, and her competence and compassion in devoting herself to seeing that every abused child lives in a healing, safe, and nurturing society. In recognition, Dr. Madrid, we are reminded, especially as public servants, to be steadfast, genuine, and hopeful in our service to the people. Thank you for the inspiration, Dr. Madrid. Mabuhay ka.
Mr. President, Senators Lapid and Angara, two authors of the said resolution, asked this representation that their sponsorship speech be inserted into the records, Mr. President. So
Thank
I
you.
move that.
Can
be
you also
inserted.
move, Majority
I will
Leader,
do
that, yes.
I will do that in a while, Mr. President.
So all
And,
of us will be included.
Yes,
Thank you.
because Senate President Pro Tempore Senator Ligarda also asked this.
With the permission of the authors, yeah.
Yes. All na. Oh. Yeah, so Mr. President, having said that, Mr. President, I will move now that all members of the Senate be made co-authors of this resolution.
There being no objection to the Majority Leader's motion, the motion is approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, no member wishes to interpolate or propose amendments to the measure. I move that we adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 173, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolutions numbers 174, 181, and 186, subject to style.
There's a motion that we adopt Senate Resolution numbers 173, 174, taking in consideration resolutions 174, 181, and 186. There being no objection, the motion is approved and the resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move to transfer Senate Bill number 787. This is banning a no permit, no exam policy act from the Committee on Basic Education to the Committee on Higher Technical and Vocational Education as primary committee and secondarily be referred to the Committee on Basic Education instead. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move to transfer Senate Bill number 366 or the Anti-Spam Act of 2022 from the Committee on Science and Technology to the Committee on Public Services as primary committee and secondarily referred to the Committee on Science and Technology instead. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I hereby move to transfer the secondary referral of Senate Bill number 382 or the Arabic Language and Islamic Values Act from Committees on Ways and Means and Finance to Committee on Cultural Communities and Muslim Affairs, and to have instead a tertiary referral thereof to the Committees on Ways and Means and Finance while maintaining its primary referral to the Committee on Basic Education. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, September 7, 2022.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majority Leader. There being no objection to the motion, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Wednesday, September 7, 2022. Have a safe and healthy evening.
Thank you, Mr. President.